following program is distributed by the Bears Barroom Radio Network. It's intended for all audiences. Draft on Tap with Danny Shimon and Niel Stopczynski.
Hey everybody, welcome to Draft on Tap. I am Aldo Gandia, and if this is the first time you're watching Draft on Tap, let me tell you real quickly how this works. This season, we're kind of doing a reality show, for lack of a better way of putting it. I'm playing the general manager of the Chicago Bears, and we're going to help the Chicago Bears come up with draft picks in the upcoming 2021 draft. And so don't worry, don't run away. I'm not the one that's going to be doing the scouting. The scouting is going to be done by two very capable guys. I'm going to welcome one of them in now. His name is Danny Shimon. Danny, how are you, brother?
Aldo, how are you, man? Doing great. Just looking forward to another great show.
Yeah, we're going to have player evaluations on the Bears. So a lot of the scouting stuff is coming up in upcoming shows, but we're going to talk about, we have to evaluate guys currently on the roster and guys who are free agents for next season. So we thought we'd center on the offense today. And then if we have time, we'll tackle the defense. But I got a feeling this is going to be so in-depth. We're going to talk about the offense. And, of course, we have to talk about this upcoming playoff game. All right. And then let me welcome in Mr. Niel Stopczynski. Niel, how are you, brother?
Doing wonderful, Aldo. Doing wonderful.
Are you as surprised that I am that the Chicago Bears are in the playoffs, Niel?
We sort of disco stewed our way in there, didn't we, Aldo?
We sure did. I'm not quite sure how we did it because after that sixth consecutive loss to the Detroit Lions, the miserable way that they blew that game in the fourth quarter, I said to myself and publicly, I don't think they're going to win another game all season. And yet here they go on a mini winning streak and are able to back in. So it's pretty incredible, isn't it, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, we got to thank the financial consultant, John Wolf, from the Rams, the backup quarterback, being able to, get a victory over the hapless Cardinals. I shouldn't call them hapless, but they blew their playoff chances towards the end of the season as well. So, the Rams winning, without their starting quarterback, Wolford came in and did the job, and that kind of snuck the Bears into the playoffs. So it's not the way you wanted to go in. I mean, you obviously want to win, especially beating the Packers, your rival, to clinch your playoff berth. But they'll go ahead and take it.
Yeah. Any of you guys aware of who what was his name? The quarterback for the Rams?
Wolford.
John Wolford.
Yeah.
Massive fan of John Wolford.
Really? Tell me why.
Yes. I watched that kid win nothing but football games for 4 years at Bishop Kenny, right on the water there in Jacksonville, Florida. Oh, and wow. I wanted him at Mississippi State, so I pounded the table for John Wolford. And that was before the whole 6-foot quarterback thing became a normalcy. But that kid did nothing but produce, did nothing but win. And he went to Wake Forest and did nothing but win for a place like Wake Forest, that is. Mm-hmm. But I was on top of him just being a really good athlete and having a really decent arm and being really good upstairs from a mental capacity standpoint, FBI standpoint, the kid had outstanding character. Mm-hmm. He was just a well-rounded, rock-solid kid. And, man, I knew that kid was going to be a baller from the very beginning. I'm so excited to see what he did. First in the history of the Super Bowl era to pass for a plus 200, run for plus 50.
I didn't know that.
In his first game.
Wow, pretty cool.
Yeah.
I thought he was joking about knowing John Wolford, but apparently he does know John Wolford.
He does.
Man.
I know him from Wake Forest. I didn't know his high school, and his, ring size and prom date.
7.5 ring size. 7. No, Fairpoo's court. But here's the thing. The funny thing about Bishop Kenny is that you always know you're watching Bishop Kenny because it's a very distinctive stadium. They don't have a far stands. All they have is just like a water feature at that high school. So it's like every time you see Jacksonville, Florida tape, whether you're watching Bulls or Bishop Kenny or Bulls at Bishop Kenny or Bishop Kenny playing a home game or whoever else is going into that stadium, you know exactly where it's at. So it's kind of fun. It's a really serene, it's great scenery at that venue.
Very nice. All right, guys, a lot of Bears fans have been quibbling this week about whether the Bears should even be in the playoffs, given that they're the likelihood that they're going to advance and much less win the Super Bowl is, far-fetched. So I want to get your opinions on this. Niel, let me begin with you. What do you think is the value, if there is any, of this team being in the 2021 playoffs?
Just morale, right? I mean, you got to have something positive to think about this season after we were down so low and so negative for so long during the middle part of this trip. And we had our ups and downs and ebbs and flows and everything else. But man, it's just nice to be here. Hopefully we can, catch some fire and go on a run and find a spark somewhere. But I mean, you look at what this team has done over the past, couple handfuls of, or this past handful of weeks, ever since you turn the play calling over to Laser and, we kind of get our offensive ish together. We put up some points, been very productive, albeit against some, sisters of the poor type defenses. But I mean, let's go ahead and be honest. We went out there and we executed. I keep saying we, but they went out there and they executed, won those football games. It's nice to have something to cheer about in the middle of January, isn't it?
How about it? Danny, I assume that you feel the same way.
Well, if it wasn't for this COVID year, you wouldn't be in the playoffs because the NFL added a seventh team, and that's how the Bears were able to.
Excuse me for interrupting, but that is not correct. The actual additional playoff team was added before the COVID. There was actually going to be an 8th playoff team if there were missed games and the season was screwed up because of COVID, but they did not add an additional playoff team because of COVID. This 7th new seed was added in February or March prior to all of this COVID mess. There's been a lot of misinformation in sports media about that. So this has nothing to do with COVID. The Bears would have been in the playoffs even if it wasn't a COVID year.
I thought. So is that something? Well, then I'm sorry about that misunderstanding because I thought it was added due to the whole COVID thing and so on and so forth.
As part of the negotiations of taking away preseason games and moving around the schedule and adding an extra week, and that was sort of like where they met in the middle, adding the other team. I think they're going to take away 2 preseason games away from the
right. And
so this is going to be the way going forward. Then I'm assuming.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Well, the other positive that I was going to bring up was the fact that typically teams like you mentioned it earlier, although teams that lose 6 games in a row, those kind of losing streaks, those teams don't make the playoffs. And the positive here is the fact that Matt Nagy was able to get this team to rally back and be able to win those final 3 game stretcher there towards end of the season, get back into contention. And then, of course, they got help out along the way with, like I said earlier, the Cardinals losing their final couple of games as well to get them, into the playoffs. So anytime you're in the playoffs, it's always a positive thing, right? It's always something that's going to look good on the organization, look good on the coaching staff, look good for the players as well. So, we have some young players on this team and who have not been weren't here in 2018, and giving them some playoff experience will be key, moving forward. In terms of what happens Sunday, like I said, a lot of times you just want to get in. You want to get in, and right now everyone's, the whole cliche is everyone's got a 0-0 record. You never know how how the ball is going to bounce here and there, and you might get a break here and there and win the game. So I remember when I was a tiny little kid, and I think it was 1994, if I'm not mistaken, it was Dave Wanstead, and the Bears got into the playoffs and they went to Minnesota, and I want to say Steve Walsh was the quarterback.
It was Steve Walsh.
It was Steve Walsh, and no one gave him a chance to beat Minnesota, and they ended up beating Minnesota. And so, I mean, you never know what happens, but it's always exciting, especially for the fan base, for the players and all that stuff. So, I think some fans aren't excited because I think some are hoping for change. Whether it's within the coaching staff, whether it's in upper management, so on and so forth. So. I don't think there'll be a change in terms of coaching staff, but I wouldn't rule out a possible, change within the organization, unless they go on a run here. So we'll see what happens. But it's exciting. I think it's exciting.
Well, it's funny that you say that because Steven just posted this in the chat room. He writes, "I think a lot of people, myself included, are worried that with the Bears making the playoffs, it gives the McCaskies a false sense of hope that they are turning the corner and they do nothing in the offseason." And so I imagine that what Steven is saying regarding doing nothing is perhaps a general manager change, perhaps a head coaching change, perhaps a change with the defensive coordinator, who I think we could all agree with Pagano that if we were to grade him, C would be the absolute top grade he would get, and maybe not get that at all from any one of us. And D and F would be something in the thinking. What do you think there, Mr. Niel Stopczynski?
That was a big talking point on Sports Talk Radio for the past couple of weeks about how, oh, yeah, we're in the playoffs now. There's going to be no changes. I'm not sure that that's 100% set in stone. I'm not sure that the McCaskies went into the season thinking to themselves, if we back our way into the playoffs, that we're not going to fire anybody. We're not going to make any changes. We're not going to make any adjustments. I think that's absurd to have that thought process at this point in the season, because you still have a lot of evaluating to do. You still have 4 quarters of evaluating to do, hopefully more. You still have at least 4 more quarters of evaluating to do. Regarding Chuck Pagano, I mean, good hell. I mean, if we put another linebacker on a wide receiver on Sunday, I'm going to lose.
Robert Quinn in the flat covering.
Robert Quinn dropping in coverage. Unbelievable. But I mean, hell, again, it's good to be back to where we're supposed to be. Let's just see what happens.
I agree. And can you guys, I mean, I was talking to Greg Gabriel about this topic this morning, and I understand that defensive coordinators now are trying their best to confuse quarterbacks and the offensive linemen with exotic blitzes, with you don't know who's rushing. Sometimes you send in 3 or 4, but you don't know who those 3 or 4 are. And so they want to keep, especially the offensive linemen, guessing. And so that's part of what Pagano is trying to do. But when you have a linebacker like Danny Trevathan guarding a 4-4-4-5 wide receiver, it just is a stupid mistake. And what is even more frustrating for me is when Matt Nagy in his press conference says, yeah, there was no confusion. Clearly there was confusion going on. And in fact, Matt LaFleur, the coach of the Packers, said that he was thinking about calling a timeout because there was all sorts of movement by the Bears, and he thought that Aaron Rodgers and the offensive linemen were getting confused. And LaFleur said, you know what? Aaron will figure it out. And he certainly did. He saw Danny Trevathan guarding the wide receiver, and he sees also Akeem Hicks dropping into coverage. He was playing nose tackle and dropping into coverage. And Josh Woods, who really was running out there with like a chicken without his head on, tripping and not providing any coverage whatsoever. It was a mess. And so I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that Pagano should just say, screw all this stuff and let's just play good old-fashioned football, go out there and beat your man and some very basic defenses against Drew Brees and the Saints?
Well, we talked about it on our New Year's Day show where, in terms of previewing the Packers game, like how do you get to a guy like Aaron Rodgers? I mean, Aaron Rodgers has seen all types of coverages, all types of disguises. And I said, you got to be creative. You got to be to the point where, pre-snap, you kind of give him a look, and then post-snap, you got to give him a different look, and then maybe surprise a guy like Aaron Rodgers, even though he's seen all these different coverages. Mm-hmm. However, I didn't intend for them to confuse their own defensive players. I mean, if you look at that play, you got Robert Quinn, not sure if he's going to be a down lineman, if he's going to be standing up from a 2-point stance. And I don't know if that's part of the design or part of the whole disguise of it. Mm-hmm. And then you got Duke Shelley coming on a corner slot blitz. And to me, it looks like he kind of slowed up towards the end there. I'm not sure if he didn't want to run into Rodgers and pick up a penalty, but there was a play actually at one point. If you notice, you go back to that play, I think that the running back was supposed to motion back into the backfield to kind of, be a protector there for Rodgers. And Rodgers told him to hold out there, stay out there, because he saw the matchup and he didn't want the Bears to adjust. He saw Trevathan or linebacker on Marquez, Valdez-Scantling. And I was like, I'm going to get rid of this ball before that corner is going to come, get me in terms of a blitz. And sure enough, it was a play. My only thing is, like, every time, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, when there's a big play given up on defense, the defensive back is always looking at each other like, what? You're supposed to be here. No, you're supposed to be here. I thought you had him. And there's too much confusion. You got to be to a point where you can't confuse your players, whether that's on the players not being into their playbook and knowing the calls and being confused, or is it not being coached up enough? So for me, I think I said last week, Pagano was coaching for his job in that Packers game. And I think he's gone by the end of the season.
Neil, you want to see a new defensive coordinator for the Bears in 2021?
Well, I think Eddie Jackson was supposed to be over the top on that play. I think if I remember right, Trevathan was supposed to be playing some sort of trail technique. I don't know what the hell kind of trail technique Danny Trevathan can play against a 4 or 5 receiver, but there should have been help over the top on that play to begin with. So there was just some massive chasms of communication that happened on that play from the very beginning. From a standpoint of philosophy, I don't know what we're doing with, drawing up that kind of deal. In that kind of situation, situational football wise, I think Chuck Pagano's kind of missed the ball from a massive level this year. And if that game was the nail in the coffin, I think he went ahead and pounded the nail in.
Yeah, and I really hate calling for somebody's job, but that's the nature of sports. These guys are making money, and it's high pressured, and to me, I'm seeing very little hope that Pagano is going to make the necessary changes. And so if I'm really the general manager and somebody in charge of football operations, I'll sit down with Pagano and tell me, how are you going to fix this? Because we've made big investments in players like Eddie Jackson, big investments in Khalil Mack, big investments in Robert Quinn. And this defense is playing worse and worse. I understand that there's been some injury issues and the COVID and blah, blah, blah. But there's no excuse why Robert Quinn has just 2 sacks this season and Eddie Jackson has 0 interceptions, and Khalil Mack doesn't look like the $150 million man, whatever it is he's making. He doesn't look like that guy. And so if it's because I spent the money unwisely on these guys, then I'm out of a job. But I got a feeling, Mr. Pagano, it's your fault. How are you going to fix it?
A couple of things. First of all, with Mac, I just have a feeling this guy has not been healthy all year long. I mean, I think he's just battling injuries here and there, and he just hasn't looked like he's 100%. But let's assume he's out there. He's playing well. I think what the other issue with getting rid of Pagano is Matt Nagy is going into his last year on his contract, and for him to go out there and bring in a qualified defensive coordinator from outside the organization, who's going to come on and say, all right, I'll move everything over to Chicago and come, coach Matt Nagy for 1 year, unless someone's out there looking for a job, kind of desperate. So I think there's talk about maybe Jay Rogers, the defensive line coach, who's a leftover from the John Fox coaching staff. Maybe he's a guy that they might be able to, promote from within and give him the defensive coordinator role and see what he does. But that's my own concern is if you give it to Pagano, who are you going to be able to, to bring in off, if you're going to go outside the organization.
He's going to have to bring in somebody that he trusts. That's what it comes down to. I mean, if he's back for next year, this is his last rodeo, because if we have the same type of thing that we have this year, next year, and we have the same sort of sentiments from fans, angry, pissed off, and just resentful against bringing Nagy back for 1 more year, then, I mean, obviously he's going to be gone. So, I mean, with this being his last rodeo, he's got to have everything just perfect, like just pristine perfect for his 1 year where he's really it's going to be a make or break type of deal. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if they get rid of Pagano, they're going to put it on Nagy probably. And they'll say, Nagy, who do you want? This is your chance to just really show that you know what the hell you're doing. Mm-hmm. Who do you want? Tell us who you want. We'll go get him.
But then at that point, you're on a 1-year contract for Nagy, and he's going to be like, I'm not going to get anybody on a 1-year contract. Do you then, if you're the Bears, do you give Nagy an extra year extension? That way he's got 2 years, and that way whoever's going to bring in from outside, if he wants to go outside that organization, the guy will be like, all right, he's got a 2-year extension. I'm here for at least 2 years, if that. Who knows? It's not guaranteed, but I'm just thinking aloud in terms of, what kind of candidates is he going to attract being on his last year of his contract.
I mean, I think you build some incentives into the contract to where, anybody that comes in knows that it's going to be a 1-year deal probably, unless things go absurdly well in this 2021 season going into 2022. You build in some incentives into the contract so that that one DC coming in knows that, hey, this isn't just a one and done type of deal. Like there's some things to shoot for here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of the problem, Campai says, what's the point, blow it all up and rip the scab? But the part of the issue is that you've got so much money invested in some contracts that you don't have outs on some of these contracts until after the 2021 season. So because of that, you almost are looking at a situation where, we got to try to win in 2021 before we blow it up and start all over again. And so what does that mean? I think Danny is on to something about Jay Rogers, the defensive line coach, a guy who, by the way, played quarterback in college. And so he has been applauded for how he's moved over into the defensive coaching area, and that his knowledge of quarterbacking and what offensive linemen do has really helped him in terms of developing guys like Bilal Nichols, and it's gotten the most out of Akeem Hicks and so forth. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And you know, the Bears really blew it when Vic Fangio left, and they didn't either promote Ed Donatelli, the defensive backs coach, or Brandon Stokey, the guy who's now over defensive coordinator with the Rams and is getting the best out of Leonard Floyd. So the Bears have made some mistakes in terms of letting some position coaches go, and they've had success as coordinators elsewhere.
Right, and Staley is a guy that was an outside linebackers coach here with the Bears. He ended up going with Fangio to the Broncos. The Rams bring him in this year as a defensive coordinator, and he's getting head coaching interviews already as just as a 1-year defensive coordinator. So definitely that's a guy that it's the future's bright for him in terms of the coaching ranks.
Indeed. All right, let's turn our attention into evaluating the 2020 Chicago Bears. And of course, we're going to start with the red hot topic of the quarterback position. Look at him. He's already getting fired up. Mitchell Trubisky started the season as the starter. He was benched for 6 games, and all those games were losses. And then when he came back, all of a sudden we saw a rejuvenated Mitch Trubisky. The offense was redesigned to better work for his strength, and he's had some success. He's thrown for 2,055 yards, 16 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a quarterback rating of 93.5. That's the old-fashioned NFL rating there. So let me begin with you, Danny. You have said absolutely not. It is time to cut your losses and bring somebody else in. What is it about Mitchell Trubisky that you feel he is unsalvageable and you don't want to bring him back? You would, if correct me if I'm wrong, you don't even want to bring him back next season on a 1 or 2 year deal, correct?
If you're bringing Mitch Trubisky back as a bridge quarterback, but you're going to tell me you're going to go out there and get your future quarterback in this draft, then I'm okay with that. But again, now you're assuming that he's going to be okay with going with a 1 year or 2 year contract. So if Mitch has options, he's not going to want to come back. If this coaching staff stays, he may not want to come back. Who knows? But in terms of me investing long term as Mitch Trubisky as my future starting quarterback, I'm sorry, it's not there for me. He hasn't shown me anything. It's year 4, and at one point, for me, it's 3 years, and then you're out. If you're not showing me improvement within 3 years, it's something that could he eventually down the road, year 5, 6, 7, finally get it? Yeah, but for me right now, he's just a limited quarterback, a quarterback that excels outside the pocket, on the move, limiting his options in terms of his reads downfield. But whenever you ask him to stay in the pocket and make a position from the pocket and make a read from the pocket, it's always an adventure. The ball goes up into double, triple coverage. It could be intercepted, and almost do another interception in the red zone last week as well versus the Packers. So it's like. For me, I'm ready to move on. You do not double down on a mistake. It was obviously a mistake to take him number 2 overall by passing guys like Aldo's man, Mahomes, my quarterback Watson, those guys, passing those guys up, and then just doubling down now by giving him a long-term contract because you've seen him do well in term versus the 31st ranked defense, 26th ranked defense, and then the 32nd ranked defense. No, I'm good. But if you bring him in as, like I said, as like a 1 year deal, as a bridge quarterback, if you will, and you go get your quarterback of the future in this draft, I can get on board with that.
The problem is currently, if the season were to stop now, the Bears would be drafting 20, and so all of the top quarterbacks, you got top 4 quarterbacks this season, they're all going to be gone probably in the first 10 picks.
Go get your quarterback. Go get him. Identify your guy and go get him.
So you're saying trade the limited draft assets that you have this year and try to acquire one of these quarterbacks, a Trey Lance, because there's no way you're going to trade assets to get Lawrence And
no, it's
those
you're not
guys
gonna get him.
gone, right?
But you gotta see. All right, so like if you look at the draft order at the top of my head, I know Jets are number 2. That pick could be available. That might be a lot. But again, the Chiefs went from 28 to 10 to get Mahomes. So if you identify a quarterback in this draft, if you see a guy, whether it's Zach Wilson, whether it's Justin Fields or one of the other quarterbacks, obviously Trevor Lawrence, I think is going to be one and done. He's going to go first round, first pick overall. But if you see one of the other guys and you say, this is the guy I want, and then that's going to take us back to, hey, do you guys trust Ryan Pace in terms of making that decision? We've seen his decision making in terms of the quarterback position not be so great. So again, you're putting some faith there in Ryan Pace, but assuming him and Matt Nagy sit down and say, you know what, pick a name, Zach Wilson, right? He's the guy we want. We're going to build around this team. We go up there and get him, whether it's at number 5 or number 4 or whatnot. You go up there and get him. You give up assets. And I hate giving up assets, guys. But you know what? You're going to have to do it. The quarterback position is a position that is primary on the football team. And if you're going to be successful, you need to get that position rectified. So let's say you go do that. You give up assets. You get your quarterback. And now Mitch Trubisky's on a 1-year, maybe 2-year option contract. I'm on board with that. But if you just say, you know what, cut bait, let Mitch go. You either have Nick Foles as your quarterback next year, your bridge quarterback, if you will, and you still go get your quarterback. That's what I want. I want them to go get their future quarterback because right now their future quarterback for me is not on the roster.
Correct, 100%. I'm not 100% sold that all those quarterbacks that we may want are going to be gone by the 10th pick. We may only need to be moving up 5 to 10 picks to get the guy we want. I think that there's a really good chance that guys like Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones are going to be mid to late first round guys. We may be sitting there at 20 and just have Trey Lance fall into our lap, which would be a best case scenario, obviously, because then we don't have to give up capital.
Right.
But, I just don't – I'm not 100% sold that all these quarterbacks are going to be gone between picks 1 and 10. So I think that there's still a lot to be played out as far as where these quarterbacks are realistically going to fall before we really have to be concerned about giving up way too much to get, the guy that we want/need.
Right. And that's a guy, and that's a perfect point. If you decide, you know what, I want Zach Wilson 1, I want Mac Jones 2, and I want Trey Lance 3. If you can't go up there and get a Zach Wilson or a Mac Jones, and by Trey Lance lands in your lap, you know what? He's a guy that's got a 1-year, he scares me with only just a 1-year starter. But again, you're bringing him in as a backup. You're not going to put him into the fire right now. You're going to sit back and learn behind a guy like Nick Foles or some veteran, right? And then let him sit there for a year and learn because his skill set. Trey Lance, we're talking about, his skill set is first round talent, no doubt about it. The only thing that really concerns me is just the 1-year starter. We've seen that play out with Mitch. We've seen that play out with Jamarcus Russell. We've seen it play out with the kid in Washington, Dwayne Haskins. Typically these guys, we don't succeed at the next level unless you are really patient with them. And the NFL nowadays is not patient with these quarterbacks, right? So 1 year you can sit them down there and have them kind of learn behind a veteran. But then that's the only thing that concerns me about Trey Lance. But whoever it is, whether it's one Jones, Lance, or Zach Wilson, go get your quarterback in this draft.
I agree with Swanky Swank here. If Zach falls out of top 10, move some mountains, 100%, man. Go ahead and get the kid.
I doubt it, man. I doubt he gets out of top 10. That's just me, but we'll see what happens.
I agree. There are so many quarterback-hungry teams in the NFL that it's going to be really, really difficult to see a quality guy, drop, outside the top 10. And let's remember that when the Chiefs traded up for Patrick Mahomes, they traded their first-round pick from that season, which was 27th, and a first-round pick in 2018, and a third-round pick for that Mahomes pick. That's a lot of draft assets, so you don't have a problem with that.
I don't if it's for the quarterback. Obviously, if you miss, you're screwed. Mm-hmm. The only thing is, one thing to keep in mind, if Champ Kelly and I tweeted this out earlier this week, if Champ Kelly gets a GM job, Bears get third-round comp picks this year and next year. Mm-hmm. So you have some extra draft capital you can work with there. So if you do that example there, you give up this year's first, which will be 20th, you give up next year's first, and you give one of those a third-round pick, for example, that can be doable. That's not going to hurt you that much. And if you get your quarterback, that's the key, though, if you get your quarterback. But you got to sit there, you got to identify and make sure this is the guy you want to build around and go get him.
And generally, guys, the way this carousel works, rarely do guys go through 3 years of interviewing for GM jobs, interviewing for director jobs, coordinator jobs without getting the job. This is Champ's 3rd year interviewing for GM jobs. I'm fairly certain that he's going to wind up somewhere outside of Chicago
Yeah, my mind's on
over the course of the
Denver.
next couple
'Cause
weeks
that's
now.
where he came from. He came from Denver, and I think Denver now with
Right.
elevating himself up to a president role. I think Champ Kelly moves in there. He was in the organization. They're familiar with him. I think that's a perfect spot for him to go to, and that's why I think he's pretty much gone. I think Bears are going to end up getting with those third round picks.
Good for them.
So if you're not re-signing Mitchell Trubisky, you guys are okay with Nick Foles being your bridge quarterback, your starting quarterback in 2021. Discuss.
I'm personally I'm not, but the only thing is contractually, and we have to get into the cap. We'll see what he's got a guaranteed contract for next year, and now it all depends on the incentives. It could be anywhere between $7 to $9 million next year. For just a 1 year. A 1 year deal of $7-9 million. That's average money that's actually like backup quarterback money. So I think that will be an option. I mean, if you go through the free agent route, and I kind of went through a real quick list of the free agent quarterbacks out there. You mean guys like Phillip Rivers, you don't want Cam Newton, you don't want Jacoby Brissett, Andy Dalton, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Jameis Winston. Those are free agents out there if you bring in from the outside. So I mean, and we don't know who's going to be available in terms of being cuts and releases and all that stuff. So. A second year on the offense, having a full off season, can you get through a year with Nick Foles as your quarterback? That's something that we have to, kind of decide and play out what our other options are.
I mean, in terms of functional fill in the blank guys until we get a quarterback ready to go, I'll take Jacoby Brissett. I'll take Andy Dalton, Beige-water pistol, as Colin Cowherd likes to call him. I'll take Andy Dalton.
But Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, give me some Fitz magic, man. I'll take a little bit of Fitz magic.
Now you got but the only problem there is you have the contract with Nick Foles. Does Philly want him? Does Philly want him? Do you get a 6th round pick from Philly for Nick Foles?
You got to eat it somehow, man. You either got to trade the kid away, you got to release him, you got to. I mean, it's a bad deal to begin with. We knew that he wasn't going to be a full-time starter when we got him. He was just an insurance policy, and that's all the kid was. I mean, he's good for spurts. That's what he's good for.
Well, I think Matt Nagy may have actually, given how quickly he pulled Trubisky in the third game, perhaps Nagy had it in his mind all along that Foles was going to be his starter because he wanted to see somebody who knew the offense, somebody who could run that offense. Now, Foles, I don't have much confidence in Foles based on what I saw, but one thing in his defense is once he finally got that starting job with the Chicago Bears, that offensive line was decimated. When the Bears played the Saints this season, I mean, they were starting Arlington Hambright at left guard and Alex Bars at center and Rashard Coward at the right guard position. And yet Foles didn't have a terrible game. He had some terrible plays, but he didn't have a terrible game. So, I think when you're throwing around guys like Jacoby Brissett and so forth, I just wonder how much of an improvement is that over Nick Foles?
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like, how much of an improvement is that going to be over Nick Foles? You have this contract that's guaranteed money. If you cut him, you got the dead cap money. That's why I'm like, if you're saying if I'm comfortable, I'm really not 100% comfortable, but looking at my ulterior options, my realistic ulterior options, right? Dak Prescott's a free agent, but you're not going to go get Dak Prescott, obviously. So, those are the free agents you're looking at. Jameis Winston, we talked about Fitzpatrick, he's got Mariota. I think Mariota's got a 2-year contract.
He's got 2 years.
Yeah, I believe they get 2 years. So unless there's like an option in there or something like that, but I didn't see him listed on the free agent market. But if Mariota is an option, that'd be a nice guy to come in and just give him a 1 year and see what he can do. However, but for me, the key, my top priority going into this offseason, go and get your future quarterback. You need one.
100%.
Well, we have to talk about, everybody in the chat room is talking about it, so we have to address the rumor that's going out there that Deshaun Watson is unhappy with the Houston Texans and that he may be asking for a trade out of Houston. If that's the case, how much would you want to see the general manager of the Chicago Bears target Deshaun Watson and try to acquire him?
This is not realistic. It's not going to happen. He's not going to be traded out of Houston. I know those reports came out today that he's unhappy because they didn't consult him in terms of the GM. They didn't consult him in terms of the head coach. So far, they haven't hired a head coach yet. So, with that contract, that cap money on their cap, trading him would be, I think, detrimental to that team. So I do not think they're going to trade Deshaun Watson.
Apparently, he was upset because he was not consulted when DeAndre Hopkins was traded and not consulted about the hiring of the general manager and learned about it. Not consulted, perhaps that's not the best way to put it, is to at least be informed, to read about it in social media, he thought was unsettling to him. So, Niel, what do you think? Would you, if the Texans were interested in talking trade, what do you think about the Chicago Bears potentially pursuing Watson?
Well, hell, I think, both me and Danny were adamant on the first show how much he was our guy when he was coming out of that draft. We'd love to have that kid. I mean, let's go ahead and be honest about that.
Right.
But it's just how much are we going to have to sacrifice in order to do that? Are we going to have a team? Are we going to have to trade away Portillo's? You know what I mean? I saw some great jokes on Twitter today about, what kind of Chicago capital we're going to have to give up for Deshaun Watson, naming rights to Hancock Tower and such. I mean, it's pretty hilarious. But I mean, it'd be great to have the kid. It's just, what kind of pipe dream deal can you cook up to make that even remotely realistic?
Not only that, go ahead.
I was just going to say that. I mean, the thing about him being pissed off. I mean, if I'm told that I'm going to have a say, or at least I'm going to be kept in the loop on what's going on from a GM or head coach perspective moving forward, knowing that they look at me as sort of like the face of the franchise outside JJ Watt, and they move forward with somebody and I have to find out about it on social media, I'm gonna be pissed, man. I mean, I totally am in the boat with how, emotionally angry he is at that organization right now. My face be red as hell.
Just for the record, I'm not saying don't go get Deshaun Watson. He's I love that guy. I mean, you give up 2 first-round picks. What do you have to do? You go get him. However, we're talking about a situation where the Bears are very little room, over the cap. This kid just signed a massive contract. You got to fit that salary into your salary cap space. You're another Jay Cutler situation. You're going to bring in the quarterback and have nothing around him, because if you get him in here, pipe dream scenario here, we go get Deshaun Watson. You can't sign Allen Robinson, right? You got to bring in all these, young guys in terms of the offensive line. You have to get rid of some of the big money guys on defense, whether it's, Khalil Mack or Eddie Jackson. And at that point, again, you have a quarterback, but nothing else around him. So, that's the whole thing. That's a whole big scenario. You got to also play into, in fact, in terms of the cap and the hit that you're going to have to bring in with making a trade like that. But yeah, I mean, dream scenario, I would love to have Deshaun Watson in the Bears. Deshaun Watson should be the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears today.
But here's another thing, though. Who's going to have leverage in the deal? If Deshaun Watson goes to that organization and says, I'm not playing another down for you because you screwed me, empty promises, and give me, crap offensive lines for years, got beat up, got injured, I'm not playing another down for you. I want you to trade me away. At that point, the Texans, they have both hands behind their back. They got to make a deal somehow.
No, he signed long term. They don't have to trade him. The Texans have all the leverage there. If he's on a rookie contract and he's got 1 year, 2 years, then you got all right. If he says I'm not playing for you guys anymore, then you got to talk about trade. But he signed a long-term contract. I think it was a 6-7 year contract. He doesn't have to. They don't have to trade him. If they say don't trade, we'll fine you. But we're not going to trade you unless the team comes in and gives us what we want, which is probably going to be 2 first-round picks and probably a third or something like that. Down the road as well. So for me, the Texans have all the leverage there.
Well, they have all the leverage with the exception that Watson could say, well, I'm just going to stay at home. I'm not coming to work. And I'm just called up Watson's contract. He did sign a 4-year, $156 million contract. And this was the first year of that contract was 2020, this past season. And so
it was actual start of this year. It wasn't like an extension to his rookie contract.
It is an extension. You're absolutely right. And so, but the potential out from the contract is 2024. So he's basically locked in for the 2021, 2022, 2023 season before anything can happen in terms of movement if it's not an agreed upon move by the Texans and Watson. So that doesn't have to be agreed upon by Watson, but Danny is right that the Texans own the
is right
share of the leverage there. So that's the situation there. All right. I think we've discussed the quarterback position a lot. Just to recap, you guys are only willing to bring Mitchell Trubisky back if he is willing to sign a acceptable team-friendly deal for 1 or 2 years to serve as kind of a bridge to get him to come back to get him to come back. Just sign him a 1 or 2 year deal that is team-friendly, correct?
With the added bonus that you are going to go get your future quarterback in this draft.
Right. That's interesting. One of the things I want to play a soundbite for you. This is Mitchell Trubisky talking about Drew Brees, who he's going to follow, who's going to face this season. Let's listen to Mitch, and particularly the middle part of the soundbite. He was asked, what do you think about Drew Brees? When did you start following him? And just what do you think about his career? What do you admire?
When you watch him, I think his passion for the game, how much he studies, and how hard he's worked at this, it's very admirable. And it's cool to see all the success he's had over the years, and kind of watching his career path. You're never out of this. So he goes from one team to another, and a lot of people count him out. And then he goes on to be a Hall of Fame quarterback and have a lot of success in this league. So hard work and determination, it just really shows a lot. And
interesting that he said, he goes from one team to another and has a Hall of Fame career. He didn't count himself out. So he's probably applying that to himself. Mitch does hold the upper hand here with the team. He's going to get other offers from other teams because there's so many teams that need a quarterback, and there's going to be one team, at least one, and maybe more than one, that are going to think, I can win with Mitchell Trubisky. I can do what Matt Nagy just started to do 3-4 weeks ago. I can do that immediately, and I can get him to be a quality quarterback, at least good enough for us to win football games. You guys want to comment on that before we move on?
No one's going to bring Mitchell Trubisky as a sure starter. No team's going to bring in Mitchell Trubisky and tell him you're the starting quarterback for this football team. I highly, highly doubt that. They'll bring him in to compete and say, you know what, we have another quarterback. We want you to compete for the position. Best man should win. But no one's going to come in and say, you know what, we're going in week 1. Mitch Trubisky is our starter. I highly doubt that.
You agree with that, Neil?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, let's be honest. What we saw with Mitch in 2018 is what we needed to see in 19 and in 20. And instead of this backwards way of trying to develop the kid, get him in the kiddie pool, then put him in the 3-foot water, and then let him learn how to swim a little bit, and then get him into the 5-foot and the 7-foot and start treading, and then you throw him in the deep end and let him actually start running an offense. The way to start developing this kid was just completely backwards, and it's maddening. Mm-hmm. If they hadn't just thrown him in the deep end in 2019 after keeping it simple in 2018, which keeping it simple is what kept Club Dub in business, maybe it'd be a different situation right now. But you can see that the kid's growth was clearly stunted, and that he didn't have a normal maturation process in the league. We may be talking a little bit differently about Mitch right now if we just had like a slow, steady growth into the maturation process of being a franchise quarterback, but that's not what happened. I think somebody is going to bring the kid in and give him a chance to compete if it's not going to be the Bears, because he still has he still has tools, and he still has some things that to bring to the table. And I think there's going to be some offensive coordinators, especially with some egos, that are going to say, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and make this kid something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they'll bring him as a starter.
Not as a starter, but they're going to at least give him a shot.
Well, yeah.
Like you said, nobody's going to bring the kid in and say, okay, you're our dude. That's not going to happen. They're going to give him a shot. Somebody's going to give him a shot. Maybe I'm sure to think that they won't.
For me, and I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but for me, Trubisky is a more athletic Kyle Orton. That's how I see him as a more athletic Kyle Orton. A guy who's going to be a career backup, probably. A guy who's got good size, but just has problem in terms of accuracy and in processing from the pocket. That's who I see him as.
All right, let us move on now and talk about the running back position. We've got to be feeling awfully good about David Montgomery's season. His stats look outstanding for a second-year running back, over 1,000 yards rushing. That's tied for 5th in the NFL. 8 rushing touchdowns, an average yards per gain of 4.3. That's not great. It's 29th in the NFL, but there's a lot of short yardage carries in his portfolio, so I'm not too worried about that. And also given the fact that he played with a putrid offensive line for a good portion of the season, it's understandable. And then the very, very encouraging thing, 54 catches this season, and he probably would have had a lot more if Matt Nagy would have listened to Mitchell Trubisky and involved the running back more in the passing game. 438 yards. That's 2 touchdowns receiving, a total of 10 touchdowns, almost 1,500 yards of total offense. You guys agree with me when I say the number 1 running back position is set with David Montgomery?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's why when he come out of that draft, Aldo, our pre-draft rankings, he was my perfect fit for the Bears. I didn't think he'd be there in the 3rd round. I thought I had him going in the 2nd round, and the only reason he's going in the 2nd round is because of his lack of breakaway speed. But in terms of vision, contact power, contact balance, the ability with the quick feet to bounce in and out of holes. We talked about his ability as a pass catcher, and I loved from him coming out of Iowa State. He was probably the best blocking running back in the draft for me in terms of my grades. Picking up blitzers off the edge and being able to recognize them, pre-snap, who's coming free and who his guy was and all that stuff. I love them, and the fact they got him in the 3rd round to me was a home run. It was just a matter of us or the coaching staff letting him, develop and show his ability as a complete running back. And then finally, obviously, with the offensive line getting solidified towards, in the middle of the area of the offensive line, I think that just kind of extenuated his ability and just showed, that this kid is a number 1 workhorse.
Niel?
Yeah. Nagy show kept listening to me every time I screamed into the TV and on Twitter that you got to give David Montgomery the ball. Mont's the man, dude. He needs to continue to be a vital piece of this offense. Anytime his club appears dysfunctional on that side of the ball is when they turn away from the running game. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. The running game is David Montgomery. I mean, the interesting thing is what will Tariq Cohen look like, going into August after that torn ACL? He was an explosive playmaking type of player that when he had both those guys in the backfield, it made it extra dangerous. And you know what was going to happen between who's going to get the ball to those guys, and you had Allen Robinson on the edge, and I mean that's going to be something interesting and in a new. That's going to be a new facet of this offense next year with the emergence of Darnell Mooney, we'll talk about in a little bit. But what's Tariq Cohen going to look like? He's kind of become a forgotten man because he got hurt so early in the year. That's going to be a massive question. But I mean, with Mont, really, the focal point being on Mont, he delivered, he showed up. He needs to be continued to have the rock given to him.
And the other thing about Cohen, and you're right, Neil, in terms of his coming back from that ACL. Depth at the running back position is something that I think is a sneaky, need position there for the Bears looking into the next season. Now, Artavius Pierce, I know he had a touchdown a couple weeks ago and he showed some burst, but he's more of like a straight line guy. He's not a guy that can cut in and out of holes. He's more of a, hit it, cut back, boom, and he's got that speed, a long distance speed to hit it up. So he might be a guy that could eventually develop into a solid backup as well. So, but yeah, definitely, I think a full, healthy Tariq Cohen, you put him in with a combination of a Montgomery, and if Pierce is a guy, if we get a 3rd running back with some good speed, I think there's definitely the running back position is going to be a solid area for the Bears going forward.
I just put up some tape of Artavius Pierce from his last year at Oregon State, and I think he's an important guy to talk about in depth here because David Montgomery is a back that you can center your entire offense around, but he's also a very punishing back. And so he's suffered a concussion this season. In last week's game against the Green Bay, there was concerns that, he might have suffered an injury. And if he would have been out of the game, then, oh boy, that offense really would have looked bad. And so you need somebody on your bench who can carry the load. And Tariq Cohen is definitely not that player. He's that gadget, flash running back, utility player. Is Artavius Pierce a guy that can carry the load so that we don't have to worry about drafting a running back in 2021? What are your guys' thoughts?
He was not a carry the load kind of back at Oregon State. Definitely a kid that's got talent, but he was always a guy that had someone else in the backfield. So he's kind of a backfield by committee in terms of in college. But if you put on that Ohio State game, you can see him with that speed, that burst to be able to run away from defenders. Obviously, Ohio State's got terrific athletes, and you see him just pulling away and using that I think it was 4.5 speed. So that's an element on the offense that Montgomery right now doesn't give you. I know he's surprised me this year with some of that burst he's got, some of that long speed. He's turned off some pretty good long runs. Montgomery, that is. So if Pierce develops and he's that backup, he gives you that long home run hitting speed. That definitely is going to be a nice 1-2 combo. And then of course Tariq Cohen, being a gadget guy in terms of coming out of the backfield. I mean, his hands. Cohen are phenomenal. So I think him coming out of the backfield, catching passes, whether it's on a wheel route or lining up in a slot, having to run routes from the slot, I think that's going to be a nice addition as well. And obviously, if you get both those guys in the offense, that's another weapon that you add, into the offensive backfield. So,
Niel, you with Danny there?
Got to commit to the run game. We don't really know what we have in Artavis Pierce. He's touched the ball 13 times this year. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but we don't know what we have in the kid. Commit to the run game. Give him a chance to see what we have. It's hard to evaluate the kid after just being sort of a role player kicking around the sideline, coming in every now and again, spelling David Montgomery when he's not getting the ball.
Now, and can we all agree here that the Cordero Patterson, that running back thing, was a failure and that we need to move on there?
100%.
I don't know if it's a failure, a complete failure. I think it's just more of a it's limited, right? You put them, give them 2 or 3 carries. I think it's a nice change of pace, especially now that we don't really have a solid backup. But yeah, I mean, in terms of him being the primary backup to Montgomery, I'm not down with that. No, I think we're good there.
Now, he's a free agent at the end of this season. He was making $5 million a year over the past 2 years, so he made $10 million during his time here in Chicago. He's probably looking for a similar deal. Would you entertain bringing him back for another season at $5 million, Niel?
Maybe. They put way too much emphasis on using him in 13 different ways on the field, and I think they need to figure out a role for him and use him in that role. If they use him maybe a little bit more like Tariq Cohen, then they might have been in business a little bit because they would have had that gadget guy replaced. But they're giving him handoffs and off tackles and everything else, zone reads. I understand he's a 6'4", 230-pound dude that runs with an axe to grind, but he's not a running back by trade. He's a guy you throw back there, kind of like a Ty Montgomery, who actually worked out at running back. But I mean, it's like, let's stop putting wide receivers at the tailback position and expecting them to be tailbacks.
He's an outstanding special teams player, and that's where his biggest value is. It's not just returning kicks, but he plays that what's it called, the gunner position, and does a good job at it. He's a Pro Bowl caliber player at that position.
Yeah, but we talked about this team being up against the cap, and it's going to come down to numbers, right? If you can bring him back. He made the Pro Bowl this year, but so I mean, he might want to increase in salary. So if he's going to be a guy that's going to want 6, 7, 8 million, you can't really afford that for a guy like get a returner, a special teams player, gadget player on offense. You really can't do that, especially for a team that's going to be up against the cap.
Right. There isn't going to be a winning team in the NFL that's going to pay him that kind of money because of where the salary cap is going to be. So the only place he could potentially make that money are teams with a lot of cap space, and those teams are generally teams that are rebuilding. So it's going to be interesting to see. What about before we get off the topic of running backs, Ryan Nall is what Ryan Nall is, right? He's a special teams player and nothing else, right?
Remember when we had that conversation when he was first brought in? I said this guy can his best. He's probably a fullback,
right?
That's all he is to me.
Mm-hmm. And apparently that's all he is to Matt Nagy too. So, all right, let's move on to that wide receiver position. And of course, when you start talking wide receivers, you begin with this gentleman, Allen Robinson, 102 receptions this year, over 1,200 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns, an average of 12.3. He is, in terms of catches, he ranks number 6 in the entire NFL, 9th in yards gained, 29th in tied for 29th in touchdown receptions. But I don't put that so much on him as I put on the faulty quarterback position and some, at times, suspect play calling. When I see Jimmy Graham and Allen Robinson on the sidelines, and when we're in the red zone position, I wonder what the hell is going on. But the big question here is, are we going to franchise tag or transition tag Allen Robinson to keep him if we can't figure out a way to work out a 2, 3, 4, 5-year deal with him? Niel, what do you think?
Whatever we need to do to keep this kid on the roster, we got to do it. This kid is how many times has he bailed out our quarterbacks this year by making unbelievable catches? He's the rock star of our passing game, and I mean, Darnell Mooney's the same way. Both those guys have become the focal points of the passing game, and I think to think anything otherwise is absurd. I mean, A-Rob is the best wide receiver we've had in a while, and we need to figure out a way to wrap this guy up some way, shape, or form. However we need to do it. Whatever money we need to spend, however cute we need to get with contracts and tags and everything else, make it happen, guys. We gotta make it happen.
Yeah, I agree. The guy's a dude. I mean, he's a guy. He's a number one receiver. He's always there. He's always available for you. He makes the tough catches. My only thing is, he's going to be looking for that 17, 18 million range, right? That's typically what these receivers, are getting nowadays, especially if you're going to franchise or transition tag him.
Right.
I keep coming back to this, right? It's going to be this cap situation. How are you gonna mess with this cap? What kind of room do you have? So my question to you guys is, I love Ron Robinson. I would love to have him on this roster. I think he's only 28 years old, so another 4-year contract is very doable for him.
Perfect.
Or if you're the 31st or 32nd ranked offense with Allen Robinson, are you going to be a 31st, 32nd ranked offense without Allen Robinson as well? And then do you go and this is a draft that's got some pretty nice receivers. Do you then draft a receiver, develop a receiver? I know Darnell Mooney's has been pretty nice, fine in the 5th round. I'm not saying he's an Allen Robinson replacement, but I mean, you invested a second round pick in Anthony Miller. It's time for Anthony Miller to step up. Do you go get a veteran free agent that's can come in and on a short term deal? I'm just throwing it out there. Not that I don't want to get sign Allen Robinson, but I'm just looking at it at a situation where you're going to be up against the cap, and if he wants 17, 18 million, and you're 32nd, 31st ranked offense with him on your offense, is it worth giving that money to him?
Mm-hmm. Spiros, where's Spiros's chat that he wants to know? Where the hell I lost it? He says this is not it, but here it is. Can he really perform? He being A-Rob, can he really perform well against good cornerbacks? He thinks that's a legitimate question. What do you guys think?
He's the number one receiver to me. I think obviously defensive coordinators always game plan for him. He's a guy that we've said many times before. Mitch Trubisky, when he drops back, that's his first read. Typically, that's the guy he always looks for. He's got a trust factor in there. So defensive coordinators see that. They put their top corners typically on him. So I think yes, I think he can play. He can beat top corners. He's not a guy that's going to have tremendous downfield speed, but he's a guy that does a good job of positioning, getting his body in position to be able to make the catch, shielding the defender from the ball, and then also a guy that's been able to go up and make a play on those contested 50-50 jump balls. So and that's where he wins his battles, Allen Robinson. So for me, he's like I said, he's a dude. He's a guy that with spotty quarterback play has been put up those solid numbers we talked about. So for me, if he goes somewhere else, another team that's got a decent quarterback, I think he's going to put up even better numbers. So, remember we didn't have Allen Robinson. We always talked about we need a number one receiver. We got one now. Exactly. So I would love to keep this guy long term, but I'm just being realistic. And when I bring up the other option in terms of letting him go, because of the cap situation. But no, I mean, this guy is a number one receiver, and I don't think there's any doubt about it.
You're with that, Niel, in terms of what's your opinion on A-Rob facing quality corners?
No, I mean 100% with Danny. I mean we're on the same tracks here. He's a number one guy, and I really think when it comes down to the offense, we talked on the New Year's show about foundational pieces. He's a foundational piece in this offense. You can't let that guy go. Because then what are we going to bring back next year? We have Anthony Miller and we have, Darnell Mooney, and then we have just a bunch of stuff. Javon Wims isn't a guy. Javon Wims should have been cut 5 weeks ago. Riley Ridley has barely seen the field all year. And who else is even on the roster? I don't even know who else is even on the roster outside of those guys. You got to keep this guy. Who are we throwing the ball to if we let him go? Keep your number one receiver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be a shame to see him go because he's definitely produced, and at 28 years old, he really is in the prime of his career.
But if you guys, just a question to you guys, like if they were going to give him the money, right, the typical starting number one receiver money, why wouldn't have given him to him right now? Because I think they don't know if they can afford it. So that's why I'm thinking like they are not even sure if they're going to bring him back or not. Not that they don't want to bring him back. I just don't know if they're going to be able to fit him into the cap.
Well, I think that right now it's the Chicago Bears that have leverage when it comes to the negotiations, which is why they have not signed him yet. I think that they know that the cap is going to be flat, and that guys that were asking for $20 million or planning to ask for $20 million next year are going to have to settle for $15 million. You were asking for $18 million, you're going to have to settle for $14 million. It's going to be that type of an off season. And so hopefully, what could happen with an A-Rob is a back-loaded contract so that you're going to see salary caps at a reduced level in 2021, but in 2022, when the expectations are that the salary cap will probably jump up $10-20 million, then that's where the players like A-Rob, if they sign a multi-year contract, that's when they're going to see their money. So things are going to work out somehow, some way if A-Rob wants to stay in Chicago and if the Bears really want to keep him. Sometimes I get the feeling that there may not be that interested in keeping him, perhaps because he's not one of Matt Nagy's guys in terms of, if you look at the receivers that were in Kansas City, he's not a Tyreek Hill. Nagy loves these speedy arena league football type receivers. And so, that's why Darnell Mooney immediately jumped over Anthony Miller. Darnell Mooney, to me, looks like an arena league football who's having a lot of success in the NFL. What do you think about that, Neil?
Yeah, I love Darnell Mooney. I don't know how many times I've said that on the show, how much I love Darnell Mooney. What a pick that was in the 5th round. Unbelievable. For all the grief that we give Ryan Pace for some of his quote unquote, bust picks that we've talked about, Darnell Mooney was a gem. Again, A-Rob and Darnell, those are the guys. And this locker room is going to be very, very salty if they don't bring back A-Rob. Those are the guys. Anthony Miller can make a play here and there. He started out the year as the number 2 option, but Darnell Mooney 100% jumped over him, and he's become the second focal point of that offense, that passing offense. If you come back next year with a quarterback that can function, with David Montgomery in the backfield, with A-Rob and Darnell Mooney, being the number 1, number 2 at receiver, I mean, we're looking pretty nice. It's going to be very, very interesting moving forward.
Yeah, but just for example, say Robinson prices himself out of the Bears range. Now, I'm just looking at the free agent market here, and a guy that really intrigues me. I know he's injured a lot, but when he's on the field, he's a hell of a player. And that's Will Fuller. He's a free agent. He's a year younger. Maybe you get him at a cheaper price. You can go and draft another receiver. Now you got a deep threat in Will Fuller. Yeah, he's not a true number 1, but he's a guy that can be a number 2. And then we'll see what the development of Darnell Mooney happens, and we'll see what you do in terms of bringing in another draft pick and see how that develops. And then now you have the tight ends to go with, your running back and your receivers. I'm just saying options are out there in case they do not want to bring back Allen Robinson. That's all I'm saying. Not that I don't want Allen Robinson back, but if you are talking about Matt Nagy liking these speed, fast guys, Tyreek Hill is not typically a quote unquote number 1 true receiver. He's just a guy that is a big playmaker because of his speed and his ability to get downfield. Bring a guy similar to him in terms of Will Fuller, who's a big play guy downfield with big time speed
and terrible hands.
What's that?
In terrible hands.
Will Fuller?
Will Fuller has terrible hands.
Well, I don't know if they're terrible. I mean, but I see him catching 50-yard passes downfield every. I mean, they might not be Allen Robinson quality, but again, you're talking about a decrease in pay there as well. So I'm just saying there's options out there. If you think about it, Juju Smith-Schuster is a free agent as well, and Chris Godwin's going to be a high price free agent. He's younger than Allen Robinson, so he's another guy out there as well. So I'm just thinking, in terms of what they're going to do in terms of their options. That's all I'm saying.
Juju Smith-Schuster needs to keep himself as far away from Chicago as possible.
Thank you. I agree with that.
I cannot stand this me stuff. Well, I thought Juju Smith-Schuster was the opposite of Antonio Brown. He's clearly shown
all the time making dances and all that stuff. Aren't you doing the same thing, Juju?
You're talking to me, right?
Yeah.
we talk about the McCaskies being a no bullshit outfit. Juju Smith-Schuster is like turning into Antonio Brown. I thought he was complete opposite of Antonio Brown.
Mhm.
I liked him when he was actually condemning Antonio Brown for all of his me stuff. But he's turned out to be a me guy, dancing on the midfield logos of the oppositions and Instagramming during pregame. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, I'm just throwing options out there. I'm not saying go get them. I'm just saying these are some options if you want.
If you're Will Fuller, though, I mean, how many 6-foot wide receivers are we going to bring in? We need a little bit of a bigger dude to replace Allen Robinson. If that's what we're doing.
Aldo was just talking about Nagy liking those arena league quick hitting receivers. I mean, if you look at the Chiefs don't have many big receivers. Their biggest target is
6'4",
tight end.
215 and can run a 4.4.
Who?
Sammy Watkins was a 6.
He's not 6'4". He's not 6'4". He's about 6 feet 6'1".
Oh, like 6'2", 6'3". He was listed as 6'4" at one point, I thought, but never mind. Okay. Either way.
Their biggest target is the tight end, Kelsey.
He's a thick dude, though.
And he's always hurt, too.
True.
I'm with Niel there that Darnell Mooney was an outstanding draft selection, and trying to bring both A-Rob and Darnell Mooney in 2021 as a general manager, that's going to be one of my top priorities. I don't particularly like pursuing wide receivers in free agency.
Right.
That's usually not a winning formula. It takes wide receivers a while to get into a system now.
How'd you get Allen Robinson?
Well, that's true, but A-Rob was a bargain guy because of the ACL injury that he had the season before. So there was a chance being taken on him, and he came at a relatively low price because of that. Now, I'm not saying that free agent wide receivers are always busts. I'm just saying that I would prefer that's a position I would prefer to build from within. You can find quality wide receivers in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Darnell Mooney, a perfect example of that. And you can keep them around for a long time. So that's what I would prefer to do. Now, we've got to talk about this guy. And Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you because you were pounding the table for this guy. And when the Chicago Bears traded back into round 2 to acquire Anthony Miller, you were happy. What has happened with his development? He's not playing this being his 3rd year, and 3rd years are usually when wide receivers start to really excel. He's had an up and down season and he's not the starter anymore. Darnell Mooney with these numbers is. So what do you think about Anthony Miller in 2020 and going forward in 2021? Is he somebody that you want to keep around?
I mean, I guess we talked about it earlier, pre-draft. I was super excited, super pumped for this kid when he got him. I think he's a guy that fits in that arena league, receiver talk we were talking about with Nagy. And I just don't know why he hasn't developed in this offense. For me personally, I think it's just the inconsistent quarterback play is what his target is. Cause like last year when I was breaking down some of the Mitch throws, a lot of times where I saw him forcing the ball into Allen Robinson, I see Anthony Miller open, running his route open. However, Mitch never looked his way. So that was my thing with him last year. We saw him, a couple times have some big games last year when they got the ball to him consistently. So for me, I think if this is a kid that goes away to another system, like say if he goes to the Chiefs or goes to another team, I think he's got a chance to really excel and show that potential that we all saw in him coming out of Memphis. So unfortunately, I just don't know what it is. Is it the offense? Is it the coaching staff? Is it him not clicking with the quarterback? I'm not sure. And you're right. Darnell Mooney has come in and he has pretty much taken his snaps from him. So that's really disappointing. But for me, I still believe in the kid. I think he's got a ton of potential. And I keep saying that whenever he gets a ball in the open field, like the time when he's a punt returner, you see his ability with the ball, be able to juke guys, make guys miss in the open field. If I don't even see why they don't just give him like slip screens or bubble screens, just get the ball in his hands and see what he can do with it. But, I'm disappointed in the lack of production, but I still think the kid's very talented.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was the same way. I was really high on the kid coming out of Memphis. I remember him from high school being a Memphis kid, and he had a ton of talent. Another one of those guys I thought, man, maybe we should give this guy a little bit more of a look when I was at Mississippi State, but we didn't. There was about 3 guys in Memphis that were all around the same 6 foot, 180 pound speedster, kind of, fast guy.
Tough as nails.
So yeah, right, exactly. And he was a guy that I remember, have a nice college career. And when we took him in that second round, I was really excited about him. I thought he had a hell of a lot of potential. He's just been a little bit too inconsistent for my liking. He did bail the hell out of Mitch Trubisky in that game last week, though, with that catch off his fingertips.
Right.
For a guy that always say he drops the ball way too much, he definitely redeemed himself there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll tell you what, one of the things when I was listening to Aaron Rodgers' press conference last week in preparation for the Bears, he was asked about Devontae Adams, and he said one of the great things about Devontae is that he likes to freelance, and he's earned the right to freelance. And he and I have kind of built this, and I'm paraphrasing, he and I have kind of built this communication where we kind of look at each other because he will see something that I will see, and he is allowed to go out there and do that. And I always get that feeling about Anthony Miller because has now a reputation for freelancing on some of his routes and adjusting his route because he sees that there's a covered area there. So that's the area he was supposed to run to, but instead he changes the degree of the pass pattern so that he could get open. But Mike Furry and Matt Nagy have not been happy with that because they say that offsets the rest of the play and that you're then bringing defenders into somebody else's space and so forth. So I just wonder, is the Bears offense too constrictive for an Anthony Miller, and perhaps he needs to go to a team that will allow him to freelance a little bit? Am I talking out of my ass here, guys? Or
no, you're making perfect sense. And my thing is that's kind of what I've been saying is like I think he just not has been syncing up with the quarterback. Now, maybe he's reading something post snap that the quarterback isn't. Like I said, last year when I was breaking down that game film, he was running open routes. He was open at times. He just wasn't getting the ball. And it was just because Trubisky was probably going to his first read. And it was Allen Robinson a lot of times. So that's my thing is I think an improved quarterback play, I think you'll see improved production. At least that's what I'm hoping. I would hate to give up on Anthony Miller. I would still like to bring him back and see what you can do with him. Because I said, the kid's talented. He's tough as nails. And I think that this guy still has the ability to become, at least a solid starter for you, whether it's a slot starter or a starter on the outside. But definitely a guy that you can use on offense, and you can use some of those talent to as a weapon. I would just hate to give up on him so soon.
Yeah, I would say this, though, that if they're asking him to be fundamentally sound as a wide receiver and he rounds off routes and goes in freelances and everything else, that creates a lot of distrust with the quarterback position. And that might be also a thing that has developed where, maybe Mitch and or Nick Foles, when he was in there, didn't trust the kid. I know in the Atlanta game, there was that whole Nick Foles told Anthony Miller, just get to the letter and I'll get it to you and everything else. That's a cute story and everything else. But the week before in the Detroit game, when he rounded off that route, Mitch threw it 2 yards ahead of him because he expected to be somewhere else. That's kind of stuff we're talking about. When you're playing receiver in the NFL, you're expected to be fundamentally sound. And when you're kind of free balling, doing your own thing, that creates a lot of resentment in the locker room. It creates a lot of resentment amongst the coaching staff, player to coach. And it just doesn't look good.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Niel. I do think, though, that on certain plays, you can't freelance every freaking down that you're out there. But on certain looks that you're getting from the defense, there might be the need to freelance a little bit to create a big play. Matt Nagy was asked today, Thursday, about Anthony Miller. He was reminded that Miller had a great game against New Orleans when they played back in early November. And the question was, how come Anthony Miller has had an up and down season? This is Matt Nagy's response.
No, he has had an up and down season, but a lot of that, it's not really because of him as much as it is, I think, as you guys know, just trying to get different people involved in this offense. You saw Cole Kmet, for instance, didn't have a whole lot early on in the first quarter of the season, slowly started getting more and more. Well, there's only one football. And so some guys are going to have good games and others might not have as much production. You look at a guy like A-Rob last week, only had a few targets, didn't have a real big game, but you have a guy like Mooney that has double-digit catches. It's just sometimes the way it goes. In that game against the Saints, we had some opportunities to be able to use them, and then he made the most of it. So I'm liking the way that he's practicing. I'm liking his mentality. Anthony Miller practices really hard, and so this will be a big week for him. To continue to keep doing what he's doing.
That pisses me off. I mean, that fucking pisses. I'm sorry, that pisses me off. I mean, to tell me, okay, we can't get the ball to our play because we have Cole Kmet this week and we have Allen Robinson this week. Dude, the Chiefs get the ball to Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. The running backs out of the backfield. DeMarcus Robinson. What are you talking about? That makes no damn sense. You're telling me that multiple playmakers on offense, I can't get them all at the ball one time. You only have one football, dude. What are you talking about? That makes no sense. That pisses me off right there. It's like what, you're an offensive. You're supposed to be an offensive coordinator, offensive guru, if you will. and you can't get the ball to your playmakers, come on. I don't know. That just pissed me off, that answer.
Although I love when Danny gets fired up, man.
Me too.
I love when that when
This is what we're talking about.
when that guy gets fired up. I love it.
Player development. Use your players to their. Like I talked about, you guys talk. Not you guys, but the coach is saying, he's running wrong routes or he's freelancing. You know what? Okay, he's a guy that Anthony Miller we're talking about here. He's a guy that's got pretty good skills with the ball in his hands. Throw him a couple of bubble screens. Throw him a couple of step screens. See what you can do with him. Get the ball in his hands. Take advantage of his talent. Don't just say, "Oh, today's going to be Cole Kmet's week. We can't get the ball to Anthony Miller. Sorry. Next week's Allen Robinson. Guys, everybody else should just lay back." That's a horrible answer.
I mean, if that's what the way we're going about our game plan, that's complete garbage. That is 100% garbage. That's hot garbage. That's flaming garbage. That's a
fireable offense if you're an offensive coordinator.
100%. When you have weapons and you're saying, "Oh well, we're going to make sure that we go ahead and get to this guy this week because he might be sad in the locker room after the game." No, you go into the game. You say, "Hey, whoever's open, give him the ball, man." Mm-hmm. You don't tailor an offense to Cole Kmet this week. We got to get him a little bit more touches because. And the thing about Nagy too, we all know this, is he does it every time he talks about the quarterback. He has mastered the art of coach speak. Anthony Miller has had an amazing week of practice. Well, so did Mitch Trubisky each and every single one of practice weeks the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm. That pisses me off too. Like, we had a great week of practice. Like, is there ever a coach comes out? We had a horrible week of practice this week, guys. We just look like shit on practice.
No.
But, it's everyone has a great week of practice.
Yeah, and here's the other thing that really pissed me off about that. He brings up Cole Kmet, right? Well, just like Cole Kmet, he didn't. Well, part of the reason Cole Kmet didn't catch a lot of passes is, number one, he saw very few snaps at the beginning of the year. Let me call it up right here. Footballguys.com says that Cole Kmet had 20 snaps in his first game, 22 snaps in the second game, 26 snaps in his third game, 15 snaps in his fourth game, 21 snaps in his fifth game, and on it goes. It wasn't until after the bye that he was getting more than twice the amount of snaps. 54, 54, 51, 64, 65, 67. So Matt Nagy, you're bullshitting us. You're giving us a load of shit. And in those 20 snap games that he was having in the beginning of the season, he was a safety valve on every play that he ran out on the formation. He was blocking for the majority of those snaps, and there was never a play called for him. So that is just utter bullshit. And so what this guy says from now on, Matt Nagy, I just don't believe it. Sometimes you say that he's mastered the art of coach speak, and I agree with you totally, Neil. But I think that he really hasn't mastered it as that, because there's just a lot of bullshit coming out of this, and it's so easy to detect his lies. It is so frustrating, and I can go on and on. I mean, he could have said much more honestly, our offense wasn't playing very well, and so there were a lack of downs. And when you get a lack of downs, there's going to be fewer opportunities to get guys the football. That would have been a much more acceptable answer, other than the fucking lie, excuse me for swearing, other than that effing lie that he just offered there with that soundbite.
Right. Yeah, do you like when he gets upset, Neil, or do you like it better when I get upset?
I like when both of you guys get upset.
Because you're right, Aldo. It makes no sense. I mean, teams are always talking about getting playmakers on the field, right? And don't tell me, this week was Allen Robinson's week, and we got the ball Allen Robinson, or this week we were getting the ball Cole Kmet. Get the ball to your playmakers. You have multiple playmakers. So 1 week, you have Darnell Mooney, you have Miller, you have Allen Robinson, you have Cole Kmet, you have Jimmy Graham in the red zone. You talked about it earlier. Why is the team in the red zone and you have probably your best red zone targets in Jimmy Graham and Allen Robinson on the sidelines? What's up with that? I don't understand.
That's what Jimmy Graham is anymore. That's all Jimmy Graham is anymore. Like at one point, he was a big time draw up your offense around this guy type of tight end. Mm-hmm. He had a nice career. At this point in his career, he is a red zone threat, mismatch threat. That's what he is. Use him in that light.
And he's actually improved his blocking, where you can feel somewhat comfortable that he's going to pick up his blocks at that. What is it? The U position when the tight end is in the line. Is that
in the line's Y? In the line's Y.
Y. So, let's move on and talk about these tight ends, because I want to get your opinion on Jimmy Graham's season. 50 receptions, 456 yards, 8 touchdowns, and that's actually 15th most in the NFL. That's impressive to me. He has a contract for next season. Do you bring him back, or do you save the money? Would you like to bring him and Cole Kmet back together for 2 years? Cole's numbers, are not bad for a rookie, but could have been, he could have had twice as many receptions if, again, he would have seen more snaps, and maybe they would have got more first downs if he would have seen some more snaps.
It wasn't his week.
Evaluate those 2 tight ends for me. Neil, why don't you begin first?
Yeah, I just love Cole Kmet, man. Once he actually emerged in this offense, you saw what kind of potential.
It's a Notre Dame guy. You love a Notre Dame guy.
Oh, hell. If he was from Ohio State, we would be saying the same thing. USC, come on. Trying to be objective here, Danny.
I just started there. No, go ahead.
Dude, tough as hell. Hands, physicality. He seems like he wants to exert physical dominance on anybody in his area code every time he catches the ball or comes up trying to make blocks, man. I just love the way this kid plays. He's going to be the guy moving forward. I don't know, if you actually use Jimmy Graham like how you need to use Jimmy Graham, sure, keep him around. At that point, is he like too expensive? We talk about, not being able to afford A-Rob. Like, I would give up Jimmy Graham, get that money into the system and figure out a way to afford A-Rob before I keep Jimmy Graham around. Yeah. I think we could figure out some secondary options at tight end before we sign Jimmy Graham again. Mm-hmm. I think, using Cole Kmet, how we have used, how teams have used Jimmy Graham in the past could be a really interesting concept. But again, it's kind of like David Montgomery, value the tight end more, draw up more plays for the tight end. Like, this guy's a dude. Cole Kmet is a dude, and we finally figured out 11 games into the season that we needed to feature him or use him more or get him more balls. Like, come on, man, we gotta do better. The thing about Jimmy Graham is at one point, like I was saying earlier, he as a scout, he was everything I wanted in a passing game tight end. Mm-hmm. He's later on in his career, and he's getting a little bit older. He's a role player now, and that's okay. We talk all the time. He's being used more as a red zone matchup. That's what he is. Is he worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, when they signed Jimmy Graham, I remember Ryan Pace and the Bears were getting reamed over, bringing him in. But I think he's had a surprising good season. We talk about 8 touchdowns, 50 receptions. Depending what the contract number is for next year, if it's reasonable, backup tight end kind of money, I'd bring him in for another year. It's not a big deal. I think him and Cole Kmet. I think he's been good for Cole Kmet in terms of helping him, learn the system and kind of get comfortable or acclimated to the NFL. So, but if he gets to a point where it's like, 9-10 million or anything like that, like Neil said, I'd rather use that money on A-Rob. So, and then I just give Cole Kmet all the snaps, and then, he's your starter because he's your future at the position. Mm-hmm. And I think, what we're seeing from Cole Kmet now, if you guys didn't see him at Notre Dame, when we were scouting him pre-snap, and last year, pre-draft, the guy's tough as nails in terms of after the catch. We saw it last week. He just doesn't go down easily. He's a guy that gives you some of that yard after contact, yard after the catch in terms of being able to power through tackles and all that stuff. So definitely a nice addition, nice second round pick. And I think he's just going to continue to get better. It just we just got to make sure Matt Nagy gives him more weeks in this game plan, so that way you can get some more targets there.
Notre Dame tight end, you guys. It's tight end you.
Yeah, they have a freshman this year. It's going to be a hell of a good player.
Another one. Yeah. You can go back about every 2 or 3 years. There was a big time dude that comes out of Notre Dame from the tight end position, and he ends up making a splash in the NFL and has a nice career.
So before Cole was it Eifert?
Tyler Eifert. Yeah, I think he was the last one.
Because Dustin Smythe hasn't been anything. There's another one now between there.
It really started with I'm blanking. The Italian kid that went to the Dolphins.
I was going to say it really started David Casper back in My days.
Well, yeah, I was actually about to say that David Casper and
Back when you were minus 20 years old.
where I was nothing but a twinkle in my dad's eye.
That's right. All right. We're already at an hour and 25 minutes. Let's go over the offensive line real quickly, and then I want to spend the last half hour or so talking about this upcoming game against the Saints.
Right on.
So here's my thinking on the offensive line is that now the middle of the line looks robust. We have got a real center in Sam Mustipher, a Notre Dame kid who is super smart. He has built his strength up. Those concerns of whether he had the strength of playing that center position are now gone. He is going to be the future, the present and future center for this Chicago Bears team. And then you've got James Daniels coming back from injury. You've got Cody Whitehair, and you've got Alex Bars as your swing player for that interior position. Is that a fair way of looking at the offensive linemen based on what you guys have seen this year? Neil, I'll start with you.
100%. These dudes have really stepped up these last handful of weeks, man, especially against the Packers, man. That interior offensive line played so damn tough. Mustipher and Bars, bravo to those guys, just throwing guys around. I mean, you look at Whitehair, Mustipher, and Bars, really solidified an interior offensive line that really was borderline pathetic at one point. I mean, you just had no idea what the hell was going on with this team from the offensive line position. I think if you look at the odd man out, it's really going to be Jermaine Ifedi, and I think he's on a 1-year deal anyways. His cement block feed really skyrocketed my anxiety on a play-by-play basis. But I mean, even if you go outside to Massey and Leno, I mean, those guys are interesting. I think at worst we need Massey back healthy to have any shot being consistent on the right side of the ball. With Leno, say what you will, not a high level guy, but he's at least consistent. You know what you're getting from the guy and aren't really ever surprised. And kudos to that kid, by the way, for getting the week 16 NFL award for stuff in the community. His Leno Claus thing this year was phenomenal. I followed that every single week. That was good stuff, man.
Yeah,
that was really cool stuff. But the thing about Leno is that you know what you're getting from the guy. You aren't really ever surprised. The dude is durable. 93 straight starts. The only Bear to start every game in the past 4 seasons. I think overall, when you look at the offensive line, left tackle, we could really be doing a hell of a lot worse. Interior really solidified. The right tackle position, I think, is the one glaring sort of question mark that you have, and it's really interesting because like I said in one of these previous shows, the offensive line position is really one that has been kind of, hot garbage my entire life. It's one of those positions that you really could never really nail down and say was it really the shining star of, or the position that was really locked down or really had it together. Mm-hmm. The thing that's interesting is James Daniels coming back next year is going to present some interesting questions inside. This offseason, I said Ifedi's going to be the odd man out, but you have 4 guys inside with Whitehair, Mustipher, and Bars, and then Daniels that can function at a starter level. That's a great problem to have, boys.
Absolutely. And Danny, you were happy with the play of James Daniels those first 3-4 games of the season before he got hurt, right?
Yeah, for me, the first when he was playing, he was the best offensive lineman the Bears had this early portion of the season. They were not saying much because of the way they were playing, but he literally was demolishing guys, destroying guys, burying defenders. And I just love the way he was playing with aggression. It just looked like he had settled in that left guard position. So for me, again, going on what you guys said as well, I agree. Now the Bears have an interior of the offensive line with 4 guys that they can rotate and the flexibility is what I love, right? Daniels can play center and left guard. Whitehair can play all 3 positions. Alex Bars has played left guard. He's played right guard, and he's played center this year as well. So I think he's found a position at right guard. So I think I like Bars there at right guard. Heading into next year, prior to this combination working out, and Mustipher was a big guy for me. Like I talked about earlier, I've already said I had mea culpa. I didn't think he belonged on the roster, but he's proven me wrong. I love his athletic ability, what he brings to the center position. Similar with why I like Daniels at center, because athletic ability to be able to get out to the second level, those combo blocks is pretty good. So Mustipher, I think at center, that's his position. I think Daniels, when he comes back next year, I think you put him at left guard. You move Whitehair to right guard. And I think right tackle is where you concentrate on the draft. Now, Leno's going to be my left tackle for next year because I think his contract calls for him to be my left tackle for next year. So what I would do is I'd bring in a young tackle, whether it's in the second round or whatnot. I bring in a young tackle, a guy that can play both left and right. For example, say he's a left tackle right now in college, but I put him in at right side. And I start him at right tackle, and then eventually when I'm getting ready to get rid of the Leno contract, I flip him over to the left side. So my only question though is can Alex Bars play right tackle? Because again, he played some right tackle at Notre Dame. He predominantly was at left tackle. Like I said, he's settled in nicely at right guard right now. But that could also be another option. So I don't know if he could play right tackle in the NFL. However, I wouldn't put it past the kid. Like I said before, these Notre Dame offensive linemen that are coming out, man, they're coming out pro ready to go. They have like 3 or 4 in this draft, and Liam Eichenberg is another guy that I'm really high on. Their left tackle right now. If we can get him, whether it's second, third round, whatever, day 2 somewhere, plug him in as a right tackle right now. I think you've solidified your line, and then you got that nice interior. And then eventually, like I said, you build that offensive line and you bring a physical presence up front too. So I'm loving the way that offensive line came together and that middle, that, center guard, the 2 guard positions.
Yeah, I asked Greg Gabriel about the offensive line, and he believes that the Bears should target offensive line in round 1. And he wants the kid from Notre Dame, Eichenberg, and says, start him off at right tackle in his rookie season. And then once Leno leaves after his contract is done, because basically the salary cap issue with him is you can release him after 2021 with a very minimal cap hit, and then move Eichenberg to left tackle. And by then you should have perhaps the kid they drafted in the 7th round,
Simmons or Albrecht.
Yeah.
Lachavious Simmons, and then there's Albrecht as well.
Yeah. He said perhaps one of those guys will be ready for the right tackle position, or you draft it, acquire a right tackle somehow else. But so enough about the offensive line. I'm encouraged by it. We're scheduled to talk more about the offensive line next week when you guys share with us your interior offensive linemen. And we'll also talk next week about our evaluation on the Bears defensive players. So what I want to do now in this last half hour of the show is talk about this upcoming game, Chicago Bears at New Orleans Saints. And so what's it going to take to beat the Saints? I asked Greg Gabriel that, and he says you got to play a flawless game. You got to make every tackle. You got to make every catch. You got to throw accurately and so forth. Well, that's an easy formula, but beyond that, what do you guys think it's going to take? Danny, you first.
For me, we talked about some of it last week, prior to playing the Packers. For me, it always starts in the trenches, right? Defensively, you gotta have looks like Kamara's going to play. You're going to have to be able to, control the run game, and then also pressure Drew Brees. He's a shorter quarterback. He's a guy that doesn't like pressure in his face. So again, Akeem Hicks, Mario Edwards, Bilal Nichols, those guys are going to be needed to go ahead and push that pocket back into Drew Brees. He's had an off year, if you will, for his standards, coming off that injury with the ribs. I know he played last week, but he just hasn't looked like his typical Drew Brees self. So I think that's going to start up front for the defense. And again, you're going to be missing probably Roquan Smith. They haven't really said, other than he's going to be a game time decision with that elbow. We don't know if it's a broken elbow, bruised elbow, whatever that is. But so I think that's going to be key there. Stop the run. And then pressure Drew Brees up the middle in his face. I know they're getting Michael Thomas back, but he's coming off an ankle injury, so we'll see how effective he is. So that's defensively. Offensively, I think you just got to continue to do what you've been doing when you were winning, which is not really put the game in Mitch's hands. Continue to utilize that we talked about, the offensive line and the run game with David Montgomery. Trying to keep the Saints off balance and continue to use the play action and rollouts and get Trubisky out of the pocket. The one thing is for my prediction for this game would be, don't be surprised if you see Nick Foles in this game. If the Bears are down big, going into the second quarter, or maybe like within 8 points or something like that, and Trubisky hasn't done it so far, I wouldn't be surprised to see if Matt Nagy goes to a Nick Foles and see if he can do another Atlanta, pull a possible defeat out of there and get a victory. So that's the only thing I can think of. But all starts up front in the trenches.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always about the trenches, 100%. The interesting thing about Nick Foles is that, although you touched on it earlier, he didn't have that bad of a game the first time around.
No.
You know, 272 yards, touchdown and a pick. Well, it
And-
wasn't terrible.
And excuse me for interrupting. Remember that the offensive line, Hambright was at left guard, Bars at center, and who was at right tackle or right guard?
Rashad Carr, wasn't it? Carr, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Human turns down.
you know, and if you look at some of the highlights from that game, you could tell Foles was not comfortable in the pocket, you know, and frankly, in all 6 of those games, there was a progression with his play that he just looked more and more uncomfortable in the pocket. And it just happened to be at the same time that the offensive line was progressively playing worse and worse because injuries were catching up with the team. And it wasn't until the bye came that the Bears coaching staff decided, you know, to come up with this formula with Sam Mustipher at the center position and Bars at right guard and the left guard being Cody Whitehair, that it suddenly started to work. So what do you guys think about what's the difference between Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles in this game? Danny, you say that you anticipate maybe your bold prediction that Foles is going to see some playing time here if the offense doesn't get. But what advantage does Mitch Trubisky have over Nick Foles against this Saints defense?
Well, it's the athletic ability and his ability to get out of the pocket and be able to use his feet, as a weapon there, but also roll out, that play action. But that's why you established a run game. You utilize the play action to be able to suck up those linebackers, and then you hit them, over the top of those linebackers in that middle of the field between the second and third levels of defense with guys like, if Mooney's playing, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, those guys in between in the middle of the field. So that's what I'm thinking it's gonna have to do. If you put Mitch Trubisky back there in the pocket, ask him to go ahead and make plays from the pocket, you're asking for trouble because they're gonna get him. Whether they're gonna sack him and confuse him, he's gonna hold on to the ball, he's gonna go down with the sack, or he's gonna end up throwing the ball up for grabs and they're going to come up with a turnover. So that's the thing. I think the formula that's worked for Mitch is being able to roll him out, use his feet, use his legs, cut the field in half for him, making, easy throws for him, easy reads. And then obviously rely heavily on David Montgomery in that running game.
Your thoughts on Trubisky, perhaps, or what advantages he will have over Foles?
No, it's the same thing that I've said all year is his ability to make plays with his legs and be mobile in the pocket and avoid the rush and everything else. I mean, that's been a standard thing that I've said week in and week out. I think the interesting thing is that, Danny, you touched on is that don't put Mitch in a situation where he has to do either too much or win the game for you. The interesting thing that they did last week against Green Bay was that they controlled the football and they valued the run game. And that's why I think, when you're in a situation where you clearly don't have the better quarterback, you need to figure out ways to keep the ball out of that better quarterback's hands, and ball control is the way you do it. And how do you control the football? You run the football. You have the ball at David Montgomery. And you put Mitch Trubisky in situations to where, you keep the offense simple enough, or you do a lot of, misdirection, or you do some smoke and mirrors, or you do some play actions, whatever the case may be. I'm not advocating for getting cute. I hate getting cute. But, you value the run game and you control the football. I think one of the reasons why we played so well against New Orleans Saints earlier in the season is that you look at the time of possession, it was almost dead even. We controlled the ball for over 33 minutes. And so I think that's a similar game plan that they need to employ, like they did last week against Green Bay. Just control the damn football, give the ball to David Montgomery, be physical as hell up front like you have been the past few weeks. And I think everything else is going to play itself out. I think defensively, the guys that are going to be missing are going to be really interesting to watch. Roquan, we're really going to miss Roquan. That kid is the next in line of great Chicago Bears linebackers. Tough, physical, men of aggression. What's this Woods kid going to do in his first full game starting? I think that's going to be an interesting thing. I think that's something that Saints might target. But I mean, outside of that, as long as there isn't any, massive chasms of communication in the back end where we give up big plays, as long as we play physical up front, we get some pressure on the quarterback. Robert Quinn actually shows up like he has the past, week and a half. I think it could be interesting. I think this game could be really, really interesting. And, take also into consideration, I mean, in a COVID era, normally that Superdome is going to be rocking and rolling. That's going to be your 12th man. There's going to be nobody in that stadium. There's going to be, there's going to be cadences echoing off the walls.
Yeah, about 5,000 people, I think, are being allowed in.
Yeah, so you're not going to have a home field environment that you have to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so that takes a big advantage, or I should say disadvantage, away from, the Bears. And so, it's going to be interesting. But like I said, I mean, overall, be smart on defense. Don't give up big plays. Control the ball. Win in the trenches. But more so than not, control the ball and don't put Mitch in a position where he has to do too much.
Danny, I'm sorry, Danny. What do you know about Trey Hendrickson? Because he leads this team in sacks. I mean, Marcus Davenport has become an afterthought almost because of what Hendrickson has done. 13.5 sacks this season. I mentioned him to Greg Gabriel, and Greg almost ejaculated in his pants. He really loved this kid coming out of college. What are your thoughts on Trey Hendrickson?
Yeah, coming out of, I believe it was Florida Atlantic. He was a pass rushing demon off the edge. He's a bit undersized, high motor, high energy kid. Terrific get off. We see right here, he does a good job of using his hands, get the club under move to get the outside leverage on a tackle and get and flatten to the quarterback. So he's definitely been their main edge guy. Coming off the edge, and like I said, 13 sacks already, and he's gonna be a handful. And then of course you have Cam Jordan on the other side, the All Pro there too. So they have a tough defense, and that's their pass rush is probably one of the reasons why they're tied, I believe, for the league lead in interceptions as a team with 18 interceptions. So that's the thing. It's like getting Mitch out of the pocket, rolling him out, getting away from that pressure is going to be where you can use that athletic ability to be able to hopefully, give him some more time and like I said, make things easier for him as well. But yeah, Trey Hendrickson and Cam Jordan off the edge, and then we have Davenport coming up the middle as well. So it's a tough defense. And I know Niel, you're touched on it. There's going to be no one there in terms of, a limited crowd. So that noise advantage is going to be not there for the Saints. But the one thing I'm looking for is Robert Quinn is last couple of weeks, he hasn't got the stats, right? He hasn't got the sacks or anything like that. I think he had 1 sack in the last couple of games, but I'm seeing him making more his presence more felt, right? He's getting to the quarterback. He's causing pressure. He's causing the quarterback to leave the pocket or move his feet. So maybe on turf, it seems like him and Mac typically play better on turf. So we'll see how those guys come up off the edge. Maybe they can make a difference. Like I said earlier, Drew Brees is pretty adept at stepping up into the pocket. So we got to make sure that pocket with Akeem Hicks, Mario Edwards, and Bilal Nichols push that offensive line back and get into Drew Brees' face and make it uncomfortable for him back there in the pocket.
Somebody in the chat room says that Mitchell Trubisky has never played well against a good defense. You guys think that's true?
That is true.
Daddy didn't miss a beat. All right. Well, let's listen to Mitch talk about this Saints defense.
They play tough and they play hard-nosed football, and they're going to be in your face, and they're going to try to change it up with a bunch of different blitzes and try to confuse you with different looks. And I think when you go against a team that gives you different looks and tries to confuse the quarterback, you just got to be on point with what plays you have in your game plan and where you need to go with the football versus whatever look they're showing. So for me, it's just going to be a big study week on our game plan and film study, and just making sure that I'm on the same page with my guys, and whatever look we get, that we're in the right play and we can have a successful play out of whatever they try to bring at us. So again, it's going to be efficiency on first and second down, staying out of third and longs, and being in those third and manageables that we've been better at these last few weeks, and staying on the field. So, and once we get down in the red zone, it's going to be huge to come away with points. But we got a lot of respect for this defense, and we know it's going to be a good challenge this weekend.
But isn't that been his biggest problem, though? is when you throw a lot of different looks at him, it seems like it really freaks him out. I mean, and sometimes it's freaked out the offensive line to a point it's been so frustrating. But Mitch has had his problems processing, and a lot of it has to do with defensive coordinators throwing different looks at him. Isn't that right, Niel?
Yeah, absolutely. There was one thing that he said, though, that I thought was really interesting, in the sense that, being efficient on first and second down, that just plays right into controlling the ball and valuing the run game and giving the ball to Montgomery, and not getting in third and long situations where you put too much onus on Mitch Trubisky making big plays. Now, again, I mean, he's a quarterback. Typically a franchise quarterback is supposed to make big plays, but again, like every time last week when we got into third and long, my anxiety skyrocketed and went through the roof. When we were going on these long 12, 13, 15, 17 play drives, controlling the ball for like 6-7 minutes off the clock, first, second down, running the ball, short passes, getting the ball down the field, pushing it down the field when it was open, never getting into worse than third and medium. We were actually really, again, from the standpoint of just like controlling the football and keeping Aaron Rodgers off the field, we had a really good game plan going. I think as long as we employ, like I was saying in the last, piece of a segment, if we just employ a lot of what we did last week against Green Bay, I think we're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, the key is staying ahead of the chains, right? You don't want Mitch back there on second and 12 or third and 11, because that's where the defense knows you're going to have to throw the ball, and Mitch's going to have to probably stay back there in the pocket and go through a progression. And again, that's where his weak spot is. So stay ahead of the chains. Second and 2, second and 1. That's typically your goal. And then that opens up the whole playbook. Whether you're going to do play action, you can dump the ball off to the tight ends. You can run the ball. So on and so forth. But Darnell Mooney, guys, if he doesn't play, that's going to be a big loss there as well, because now I don't know if do you call up Riley Ridley, play him on a playoff game? Do you rely more on Javon Wims? Because now when you go 3 receiver sets, I'm assuming Javon Wims is your third receiver, along with Allen Robinson and Miller. And Robinson didn't practice today too, I believe. I think with a hamstring as well. So it's I don't know. I think they haven't announced in terms of the ankle sprain with Mooney. If it was a high ankle sprain, if it's a high ankle sprain, he's not playing.
Yeah.
So we don't know yet, but that's going to be a huge loss. Both with him on offense, and then we talked about earlier with Roquan Smith on defense. Those are going to be 2 guys that you really needed in this game to have a chance. And I think the Lions, 10 points, the spread right now. I think the Saints are favored by 10 points, if I heard correctly. I don't know. Neil, you're the bookie here. Neil, what we got going on over there?
Give me 2 seconds. Let me talk to my guy.
Yeah, he's got a guy's guy. But yeah, so that's the thing is keeping the game, in the trenches. We talked about earlier, staying ahead of the chains, making it, a reasonable down and distance for the Trubisky. That way opens up your offense and gives you the ability to, keep going down the field and keeping that offense off of the field. So this is going to be a big game, guys. I mean, I think Saints are going to win, but I have a feeling like the Bears are going to make it. Like it's not going to be a blowout. I think the Bears are going to be a one possession game. And I think the Bears are going to stay in it. I'm just curious to see what happens after the game. And, if they lose or whatnot, see if there's going to be any sort of changes or any sort of declarations after the season ends. So that's going to be my big thing here, seeing what happens here.
Yeah, I feel like it could potentially be a blowout if Roquan doesn't play, because Breeze will be so efficient at exploiting Josh Woods. Now, Josh Woods, maybe after a full week of practicing, he'll play a better game. I like Josh Woods. He's a converted defensive back playing the linebacker. He's added the strength and power to become a fairly good tackler. He's played well in special teams and so forth. But he clearly was not ready to take on the Roquan Smith role against the Green Bay Packers. He couldn't, he didn't know what he was doing half the time. He was thinking too much. So hopefully if Roquan doesn't play and Josh has spent the week getting to know the playbook, getting to know what his assignments are and so forth, if he plays better, then potentially the Bears won't get blown out. But I don't know. I don't feel good about the veteran quarterback. It'll be similar to what Aaron Rodgers did to Josh Woods. That's my biggest concern. I do believe that this Bears offense can have some success. And Neil, I hear what you're saying about running a methodical offense, but Mitch was asked today, do you feel like you need to take some chances? This was his response.
In the game of football, you're always playing with that line of when to try to make a big play or just when not to take a really bad play. So it'll be just trusting my eyes, and if I'm hot in a protection, throwing hot. If we need to re-mic and to pick up protection, if we need to check and get into a different play, just doing all the different things that you can do to adjust to the blitzes. We got to be on top of that, and it comes down to communication and study throughout the week. And whatever they're giving us, we got to take it. And it's just staying poised in the pocket and doing our job. So if everyone does our job description and we're on the same page, communicating and pointing it out, I think we could pick it up or either throw hot and just be on top of those adjustments that we need to do to be successful.
Danny, when he says throw hot, what does he mean by that?
It means pre-snap, identifying the blitz, reading the blitz, and then knowing who your hot receiver is to get the ball out in time to, so you can avoid the oncoming uncovered blitzer. So, and that's an area where Mitch struggles, that pre-snap, post-snap, identifying coverages and all that stuff. I think last year, was it last year? Yeah, I think it was last year where, Nagy was doing the whole, Sean McVay thing where he was talking into his ear up until that 15-second clock where they cut off the communication, trying to kind of give him help in terms of identifying coverages, how many, what kind of personnel they have in the field, just to kind of give them some assistance there in terms of identifying what they might be doing on defense. So I don't know if that's still happening or not with Laser, but that's an area that Mitch struggles in, pre and post snap, and then also obviously, identifying coverages while in the pocket as well. So I'm telling you, it's something that if they confine him to that pocket and they get him, those edge rushers up the field and he has nowhere to get out of there, I think then it might be a long day for the Bears.
One of the things that Greg Gabriel said, and actually I heard Tom Thayer say the same thing, is on defense, the Bears just have to don't worry so much about Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Those guys are going to get their yards. Go after Drew Brees. He's a 43-year-old quarterback. He had broken ribs earlier in the season. He is now become the Achilles heel of this team. If you pressure him and you get after him, you can disrupt this Saints offense and they may not blow you out. Neil, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's kind of been the Achilles heel for a couple of years now, to be honest with you. That the arm strength's kind of going away, and he hasn't been as much of a difference maker, from the quarterback position as he has been, historically. But yeah, I mean, the guy can't be feeling good right now. I mean, he's talking about retiring and going into the NBC booth, and in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I mean, let's go ahead and pin our ears back and try to get after the guy, not at the risk of putting us at a disadvantage. In the defensive backfield. But I mean, let's go ahead and pin our ears back after the guy, get a couple hits on him, and see if we can get him out of the game.
Yeah, that's why when you mentioned the loss of Roquan, that's going to be huge. I agree with you, Aldo. But but how do you offset having a young guy back there in Josh Woods is you get that pass rush on Breeze, and like I said, especially in up the middle. Be able to, not allow them to go ahead and step up in the pocket and be able to look over the defensive line or line of scrimmage and find receivers downfield. So that interior up the field pass rush with Akeem Hicks and Mario Edwards and Bilal Nichols, that's going to be huge. That's going to be key for the Bears as well. So you get them with those guys up front. Now the Saints have a damn good offensive line as well. So I mean, they're no pushovers there on the offensive line with Taron Armstead and Andres Pete and all those guys. So it's going to be a tough game. But if you can win those battles up front with that defensive front, I think that's going to be able to not only control Drew Brees or limit some what things he can do downfield, but also help protect a young guy, Josh Woods, possibly starting his first game being a playoff game.
All right. I asked people in the chat room if they had any questions for you guys. Here's the first one. The Factor wants to know if you have to keep Allen Robinson or Kyle Fuller, who do you keep? Who wants to jump in first?
Go ahead, Neil.
I think Lockdown Island guys are probably more valuable.
But as Kyle Fuller, Lockdown Island guy, though?
He's. I mean, listen. Like when you talk about the cornerback position, you can argue that that's the best we've been at that position since we had Peanut and Jennings.
I agree. Yeah, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean Kyle and Jalen. Those when Jalen went down, that put a hell of a lot more pressure on Kyle. So I do feel like there is monumentally more depth at the receiver position than there is at the corner position. I think you really have to find. You really have to put in a lot of work to find a corner that can lock down his side of the field. And by lock down, I mean it's really hard to. It's not like you have Darrelle Revis like type guys, floating around out there, and that style of game that used to exist. Mm-hmm. What lockdown corner used to mean is different than what it means now. But I think that what Kyle Fuller brings to the table is a dude that has a lot of physicality. He's got a really good FBI. He's got the ability to change direction on a dime and spike to the ball better than a lot of the guys can in the league. His play recognition is really good, and really, I mean, I'm going to go offbeat just for like 1 second. Kendall Vildor last week when he dropped that money, his play recognition on that play and flipping his hips and spiking to the ball, that was exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's, and I know that we talked about how in the I'm pretty sure it was on the New Year's show how this personnel staff loved what they saw in Kendall Vildor. And they were really excited about what he could bring to the table. And you hope that he's the type of kid that could bring that type of stuff week in and week out going forward. And he could be a very, very talented third, cornerback in that room, coming in and playing maybe some nickel, or maybe, we get creative with how we use all these guys. But going back to Kyle, I mean, you love the way that kid plays the game. He's every bit as valuable as where we took him, what we're paying him. And, I mean, if it gun to my head, I'm gonna say Fuller, but man, that's a tough call, guys.
That's a great question factor.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I would go with Fuller as well. Again, like I said, I don't think he's a shutdown corner, but he's the best corner on the Bears. I think he's more comfortable off man, and then just being able to click his heels and transition downfield, and he's probably the best tackler in their secondary right now, if you think about it. So
that's not even close either.
Yeah, so
I think he's one of the best tackling cornerbacks in the NFL.
Yeah. I'd give you that too. Yeah,
100%.
I watch a lot.
Really isn't Eddie Jackson.
That's for sure.
But yeah, I mean, him, like if you compare him to like Jalen Ramsey, I think Ramsey's more of that shutdown, lockdown corner than Fuller is. But I think Fuller's strengths are obviously, we talked about it, his tackling, open field tackle. He's a physical corner. He's a guy that's been able to make plays on the ball as well. So I think his development has really been a nice thing for the Bears, and that's a good thing they've been able to match that contract to keep him around. So yeah, to answer the question, I agree with Neil. I'd keep Kyle Fuller over Allen Robinson.
I've been watching Chicago Bears football for a long, long time. Charles Tillman is the best cornerback I've ever seen wear a Bears uniform, and Kyle Fuller is the second best cornerback. I would hate to lose him. That's a great question factor, because I haven't seen a lot of Bears wide receivers better than Allen Robinson. So that's one that I would have some sleepless nights thinking about. That's for sure.
I would say we've had better wide receivers historically than we've had better corners historically.
Really? That's a good debate question.
Interesting.
That's a good debate. I'll ask people in the chat room if they want to chime in on that. The next question, Steven, Neil, and Danny. By the way, it's N-I-E.
Yeah, way to spell my name wrong, Steven. Unbelievable.
Are 100% out on Kyle Trask after his terrible performance in the Cotton Bowl?
I'm not. I don't know about Neil, but I'm not 100% out on him. I'm not big on him either. And I think we've talked about him before in other shows in terms of what my issues with him is. He's not overly athletic, but his arm strength really concerns me in terms of being able to drive it at the next level. But in terms of a kid that I think also he's another kid that does a lot of half field reads, comes from that offensive system in Florida where they're not asking to necessarily continue to go through a full field read all the time. So there's gonna be some learning there as well, but I definitely have him in the second round. He's not a first round quarterback for me. If you miss out on the five for the guys I have in the first round and you drop down to the second round and it's, he's there, I wouldn't mind going after him. Depends who's available though. If my guy Sam Ehlinger is there, I think that might be high. I think I'm high on Ehlinger than a lot of people in this draft is. But if you ask me to pick between him and Ehlinger, I still go with Ehlinger. I don't think Neil goes that way, but that's how I would go. But if Ehlinger's gone and I'm in the second round and Kyle Trask is available, I'd bring him in.
Danny Hookham is underestimating me over here. I actually would take Ehlinger over Kyle Trask.
I convinced you finally.
I actually would. But I mean, again, like for me, Kyle Trask for what the Bears do is not second round value. He's fourth round value for me. I would take him in the fourth round. If he was available in the fourth round, take him in the fourth round. But he's not going to be available in the fourth round. I don't think we take him in the second round because he's not a fit. You got to talk about fit. And for a kid like Kyle Trask is not fit for what the Bears do, what the Bears value. And so I really think, he's a nice quarterback, and I think he does really some really interesting things, and he played in a dynamic, type of scheme over there at Florida and all these types of things. But I mean, terrible. Number one is a terrible word to use to describe how bad that performance was.
Right.
And even
also,
worse was the way that his dad reacted on social media, which is completely incomprehensible. But when it boils down to it, the thing you look at is that who are the guys that are fit for the Bears? I think that the guys that are fits that are gettable, right? There's two prongs to that: guys that are fits and guys that are gettable, and that is first round guys in my mind. Jones, Wilson, Lance, and then second or third, you're talking about a guy like Ellinger. And then from there, it just, I don't know where you go, because then you have a bunch of other moving pieces with other valuable positions that are probably higher needs at those positions when you're talking about getting further off into the draft in rounds, 2, 3, 4, and 5, than it would be to take a quarterback that is just going to be like another Tyler Bray kicking on the bench, stealing paychecks from week after week. I think that, going back to what Gabriel said, he wants to go ahead with an offensive line in the first round. I could get behind that. I think your second round pick is probably your offensive tackle. I think your first round pick is your quarterback, and then we rock and roll from there to see what happens with who falls off the board and the ebb and flow of the way the draft goes.
Yeah, the other quarterbacks they talk about, guys, for me at least, are day 3 intrigue me and Niel, you and I've talked about this, is Kellen Mond. His inconsistencies over the years at Texas A&M has really driven me crazy, but you look at that size, the athletic ability, the arm strength. He's the guy that fits that Bears profile you're talking about. So he's another guy. If he's available, he's getting a lot of love, man. And I don't know, I might go back and dive some more into his tapes, but every time I put him on, he'll make a great throw, make a great play, and the next thing you know, he's throwing the ball up for grabs and double, triple coverage. He's bouncing the ball in front of a receiver. So I had a trainer last year at the Senior Bowl. Whose guy he was training one of the receivers from Texas A&M, and he was just straight out just going off on Kellen Mond and saying that his guy would have been a high day 2 pick if it wasn't for the quarterback he was playing with. So but I know that he had a solid season this year. He just announced, I think it was today or yesterday, that he's coming out for the draft for sure. So he's a guy that fits athletically that profile we're talking about, Niel, in terms of fitting that Bear system. It's just that, what can you do with him? Do you have trust in the coaching staff to be able to mold this kid, take that raw talent and make him into, a legitimate NFL quarterback? So that's a guy that intrigues me. Brock Purdy is a guy that I think intrigues me a little bit. He's a little bit on the shorter side, has a quick feet, solid arm strength, but his decision-making is horrible at times. And, so that's something that worries me as well. So another guy that I'm not going to just come in and assume he's going to be my quarterback of the future, but a guy I'd bring in and just see what happens with him too. But that's why I got him more of a day 3 pick. So, but yeah, I have 7 guys. And I think Neil's on the same board there in terms of 7 guys in the first 2 rounds. But if you get either a Mac Jones or a Zach Wilson in the first round, if I'm the Bears, even though Mac Jones doesn't fit the athletic profile we're talking about, I just love the kid's moxie, his ability to be able to get that ball downfield. Probably the best deep ball thrower in the draft. Uncanny accuracy on his deep ball, even on his crossing routes. And I know he's got great weapons on the outside, but I just like the kid, his makeup, and I think that guy's going to have a real good future as well in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he may not be a really athletic dude, but I mean, he's not a standing statue back there. He can move a little bit. He's not a stick figure. He's smart. We saw that in the game last week, in the semifinal game last week. He got out of the pocket, moved a little bit. Like he's not, he's not stiff now. Right. He's going to be able to do some things.
That's why I'm so high in this draft class in terms of the quarterback position. That's why I say if you're Bears, you got to go get your guy this year. You got to sit down and you got to identify the guy and go get him, whether it's, Fields or if it's, Zach Wilson and or Mac Jones or Trey Lance or whoever it is. One of those 7 guys, I think should be your quarterback you bring in here, and that should be hopefully your quarterback of the future.
What about if Jamie Newman decides not to sit out his pro day or the combine? Would you be interested in talking to Jamie Newman?
he's got a skill set, man. He's about 6'3", 6'4". He's got a good arm, solid athlete. Yeah. We seen him last year at Wake Forest making plays with his legs. It's just hard for me. Again, he was a 1-year starter. He's a guy that's opted out this year. There's some talk about some question marks in terms of why he opted out and all that stuff. So, but definitely a guy. He falls in that whole Kellen Mond, Brock Purdy, day 3 mix for me too. The guy I'm bringing in as a guy I'm looking to develop, but not a guy that I'm going to pencil in for sure as my future starter.
Yeah, he's a guy to me that has a lot of work to do.
Mhm.
You know, he's I mean, he's on the ground floor right now with all the rest of these guys. He's got to work his way up. I'm not really, you know, putting him very high on the board right now, you know, starting, you know, from here going forward.
I
I think he's a guy, and I said that during the quarterback show. You know, one of our
Mhm.
first shows, I said during the quarterback show. I think it's absolutely absurd if he doesn't come back for one more year and, you know, do what he had set out to do. You know, run an SEC offense
Mhm.
at the top level, and instead of, you know, staying at Wake Forest. I mean, that's what he wanted to do. That was what his idea was. His goal was to show everybody that he can play.
Right.
Come back one more year and do it.
Right. Yeah. Disappointing. Ravi wants to know, is it feasible to fire Pace and let Nagy play out his last season? Actually, Nagy has 2 seasons left. It's Pace that has 1 more year left on his contract.
Is it 2 on Nagy? Okay.
Yeah, because he signed a 5-year contract in 2018. So Nagy has the 2021 and 2022 seasons left. It's Pace that has just 1 year left, which is weird why they would have signed Nagy to a 5-year contract and not have it married up to the general manager that chose him. But here's my thought on this. And Brad Biggs has been writing about this on the Chicago Tribune. There is a rumor, he has been told by 2 people, 2 different people, that the Bears might be interested in Mike Borgonzi, the head of football operations for the Kansas City Chiefs. So it got me to wondering, you know, if this is true, if there is an iota of truth to this, does it mean that there has been some kind of a power struggle at Hallis Hall? And does it mean that Matt Nagy might be winning that power struggle and that they want to team up Nagy with somebody he's worked with before in Kansas City? And that way Borgonzi and Nagy can pick the next quarterback for the Chicago Bears, because they've already made the decision that Mitchell Trubisky will not be back in 2021. And they don't want to allow Ryan Pace to make the decision on the next quarterback because he's failed at his quarterback selections with Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky and Mike Glennon. So it's a very, very interesting scenario. So the question, though, is Mike Borgonzi going to be available when the Bears are out of the playoffs? If they're out on Monday, you know, then maybe they can make these dramatic moves, fire Pace and start talking to Mike Borgonzi and other potential general managers, and perhaps keep Matt Nagy with the Chicago Bears. What do you guys think about that theory?
Yeah, I brought up, I don't think if we're just off mic or if we're on the show a couple weeks ago, I brought up Borgonzi. That's a name I heard as well because of, you know, he with the Chiefs and this connection with Nagy. And that's a good point, Aldo, because I thought about it too. I'm like, so has Matt Nagy, has he have more clout in the organization than a Ryan Pace? So then I fall back on a contract thing, you know, and obviously you just mentioned he's got 2 years left on a contract. You know, if they like Matt Nagy and they think, you know, he hasn't had a losing season yet, right? You know, 12-4, or was it 13-3 the first season, 8-8 last 2 years, you know, made playoffs 2 out of 3 years. You know, that's the thing that we haven't seen here recently. So I think, you know, I think it, and this, they might have the same question or fears that I do with Ryan Pace. You know, I've given Pace a solid grade in terms of what he's done with his roster. You know, he took a dead roster and he overhauled the whole damn thing. And I give him a solid B. Has he missed on first round picks? Yeah, he has. He's missed on the quarterback. Yes, he has. But I think overall, I think he's done a solid job. So I think my biggest fear with Pace is, how do I trust him? Like you just mentioned, Aldo, how do I trust him to go and get that quarterback? How, you know, if I'm, you know, McCaskey or whoever, and he comes to me and says, you know what, I want to go get Justin Fields, and it's the second pick in the draft, and I'm giving up all this asset, and I'm going to give him a big contract. How do you know that he knows what he's looking at? So that's the thing that might be, you know, something in play as well. In terms of, has it been done before, to answer the question? Yeah, it happens all the time. And we see now in the NFL where they bring in the head coach first, and then they go get the general manager. The general manager basically is a lot of times is just the talent evaluator, the guy who brings in the draft and the talent, free agent, and all that stuff. So I don't think it'll be that case here. However, my thing is, and I don't know if you guys agree, if that's the case, if they're going to do something like that, maybe they bring in a head of football operations guy. And head of operations guy then brings in a Borgonzi or whoever to be the GM to do the talent evaluation. And now we have a football operations guy that's going to oversee both Nagy and the GM.
Mm-hmm.
That's my question.
Niel, any thoughts?
It's an interesting argument.
Yeah.
I think that, that allows that argument that we were talking about earlier regarding the defensive coordinator, assuming that Pagano's going to be gone. That allows that argument that Nagy is going to be allowed to bring in whoever the hell he wants to be the DC a hell of a lot more water.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thought he only had 1 year left on his contract, like Danny did. I thought he only had 1 year left, which would mean that we're gonna have to really be creative with that contract, luring somebody in that can really change the game, like Vic did. But I mean, is there also a guy out there like Vic that we can go in and haul in here? I don't know, but that's interesting, type of deal right there. Bringing in Organzi, having Nagy stick around for a couple more years, figuring out the defensive coordinator position. I mean, if we get another Nick Fangio type dude coming back in here and bolstering that defense back up, and we make some changes as far as like who's playing quarterback and solidifying a couple other position groups. Next couple of years could be really interesting, boys.
I have a name for defensive coordinator. I don't know if he's still interested or not, but Wade Phillips, he's out there. Oh,
Let's sit here like, are you serious?
We'll move on to the next question. Alex Sims asks, do you think it's time to trade Akeem Hicks because Bilal Nichols is due for a contract extension? And it is interesting. This is a really fascinating question too, because Akeem Hicks is going to eat up a lot of your cap dollars. And if the salary cap is going to be an issue next season, then maybe you trade Akeem Hicks, who has been suffering some injuries the last 2 seasons. There's wear and tear in his body, but there's no doubt that when he is healthy, he is a force. But perhaps you have to kind of look to the future and make a move. You guys have any thoughts on that?
I am not trading Akeem Hicks. First of all, he is way, way too important for this defense. You notice him the minute he's off the field. The offensive knows they're running at that position. So they're running at his spot that he's not there anymore. So he's a big time impact player. Second thing is, you just mentioned he's getting up there in age. He's coming on some injuries. You're not going to get that much for him in terms of draft capital. People think you're going to get a first, second round pick for him. They're not going to give you a first or second round pick for Akeem Hicks, even though his value on the team and his play on the field is probably worth a first or second round pick, but you're not going to get it. At best, you might get a fourth round pick, maybe probably a fifth round pick for him. So at that point, it's not worth for me to trade him at all. So, in terms of leadership, in terms of impact on the field, in terms of what he does for this defense, I do not trade Akeem Hicks.
Yeah, trading Akeem Hicks, no chance. No chance. That dude's an alpha. He's a leader. We all know that. And like I said, and when he's not playing, this defense goes to hell. In a handbasket, arguably. I mean, he's arguably the MVP of this side of the ball. Nichols, I mean, surprisingly good year. Kid really grew over the course of the season with his role expanding. He's a guy I would like to see him continue to evolve in his own specific role. But I mean, as far as guys that the defense rallies behind and around and really causes a lot of havoc and changes the game. I mean, he's that dude. You can't get rid of that guy. Foundational players. Again, Aldo, foundational players.
Elijah has a question, and we discussed this early in the show. What would you all give up for Deshaun? And I think, we are in agreement that a deal sort of like the Patrick Mahomes deal when the Kansas City Chiefs traded their 27th pick of the first round in 2017 and their 2018 first rounder and a third rounder to move up to the 10th spot to get Deshaun Watson. That might be kind of a good deal. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, easily. It's going to cost you 2 first round picks and then more. So probably 2 first and a third, or 2 first and a swap of seconds, or something like that. That's but for sure, I think it's going to cost you 2 first round picks. Remember, the Texans have no first or second round picks. The Dolphins own both picks, and I think the Dolphins have the third or was it a 4th pick in the draft because of the Texans? Yeah. So it's going to cost you at least 2 and then some.
By the way, Stephen has been asking this question now the 3rd or 4th time. He wanted to know your thoughts on Tom Herman getting fired.
I do, Stephen. That's a good call. I do think Ellinger is a victim of Tom Herman's offense. I looked at that offense a lot of times. I think, a lot of quarterback power draws and a lot of, slip screens. And I think that's where you saw, some talent evaluators, say, he runs a Tim Tebow offense. Now, when that ticked me off, because when you go back and look at Tim Tebow, I mean, there was no chance, at least in my opinion, that Tim Tebow was going to be a successful NFL long-term quarterback. Mm-hmm. I think Alger has an opportunity, has a chance to be that, type of quarterback. What has disappointed me a little bit with Ellinger is his downfield accuracy has gone off this last year and a half. I want to say, I think he was more accurate downfield in the first couple of years, years at Texas. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but overall, in terms of athletic ability, a guy can roll out, a guy can use his feet to be a dual threat quarterback. I think he's got over 30 or 40 rushing touchdowns in his career. Kid is smart, is a leader, and then those intangibles is really what drives me to I think Ellinger is going to be successful in this league. He might not be a superstar, an all-pro, but he's going to be a solid, week in and week out starter for an NFL team at the worst.
Cheers to Steven, number one, for spelling my name right. I appreciate that. I'm not an advocate for people getting fired. I'm not that guy. No, I mean, come on, Dan. Sam is Tebow with a better arm and better capability of passing the football. Tebow could throw the football. Sam could pass the football. There's a massive difference.
Yeah. Well, Tebow's just an athlete playing quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I was more of a quarterback playing the position.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love we talk about moxie and we talk about leadership and character and everything else. He has all those things. Those are incredibly valuable. We talk about his ability to move the pocket, be athletic, make plays with his legs. He's got those things. His toughness, and the ability to score running the football. He runs the same offense that they had Tebow running in his days in Florida. I mean, that's what I've gotten around the college football game is when I talk to some people is that what they do there is pretty much exactly. I mean, minus all the goofy shit that they did at Florida when Urban Meyer was there and everything else. They pretty much do all the same, types of things. They put the same sort of responsibilities on his shoulders. Right. And he's the same kind of player. They're about the same size, same girth. He's going to run probably the same, type of 40 and jump the same type of vertical and do all the, all the similar, underwear Olympics things the same way. I like the kid a lot. I'm just not 100% sold that he's that high up as a second round guy. I think he's third round value to me, but I think he's intriguing as a second round guy. I also don't think he got Tom Herman fired.
Alex Sims, we talked about this early in the show. Would you guys be willing to give up a future first to trade it for Zach Wilson? It's going to take more than just a first rounder to trade up for Zach Wilson. I truly believe he's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL. So it's going to be a couple of firsts and a third rounder. But you guys are both in agreement that would be the guy that you would make that kind of an investment, right, guys?
Yeah, I've been pounding the table for that kid since August. Mm-hmm. He's since week 3. I mean, I gave it a couple of weeks just to make sure that this wasn't just an aberration. But as efficient as that kid is, as athletic as that kid is, and again, talk about the same things, leadership and character and all those types of things. That kid makes some big time plays, man. All right. Again, I'm just not. I'm not, specifically 100% sold that he's a top 5 guy. That's just me. I still want to just really let that marinate a little bit before I get, giddy about him being a top 5 guy. I've been.
Do you have a quarterback who's top 5
first round guy?
Do you have a quarterback? Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, right? I'm assuming he's a top 5 guy for you.
Yeah, Trevor and Justin are the top 5 guys. Okay. And I'm not sure that there's anybody in the top 5 that needs a quarterback outside of the Jaguars, and I don't know what the Jets are going to do, to be honest with you. I mean, are they going to keep Sam Darnold? I think Sam Darnold, number one, needs a different area code. I think he needs to get the hell out of New York. In that sense, I think it could be interesting if the
Vikings I think Vikings have number 9. I want to say, or is it? Aren't the Vikings in the top 10, or am I missing that one?
The Vikings are number 14.
Okay, no. There was another team in the top 10. I thought I saw.
The Falcons are going to need a quarterback. Falcons are hot garbage this year, and Matt Ryan's getting old. They're probably going to move on from him. A new coach coming in, new scheme probably. They're going to move on from Matt Ryan. I can easily see that happening. what we got here? Atlanta's going to need a guy. Cincinnati has their guy. Philly,
Detroit,
what are they going to do between
Carolina?
and
Carolina was a team.
Detroit, yeah, I mean, they got an aging quarterback, but he's still only 32 years old and probably still has some gas left in the tank. Carolina, Teddy Bridgewater, they just signed him. Denver has Drew Lock. I think he's really young and talented. Dallas, what the hell is Dallas going to do with Dak? Are they going to sign Dak? Are they going to tag Dak? Are they going to appreciate Dak? Are they not going to appreciate Dak?
Jerry Jones said this week that we have to sign Dak, and I realize that Dak has the upper hand in the negotiations. So, whatever that means, that's what he said.
I mean, I think you're getting down to. I mean, really, I think Minnesota is probably the next place that needs a quarterback. If you're going down the list, down from Atlanta.
I think San Francisco is going to probably try and move on from Garoppolo. I'm not 100% on that one too. They might go for a quarterback. Not 100% on that one though. But yeah, Minnesota, New England could use a quarterback, but I don't think Belichick's going to go first round quarterback. So we'll see what goes on there. But yeah, I mean, if you go if you stay here at 20 now, if Washington wins, which is probably not, but if they win and the Bears lose, will the Bears jump Washington? Right? That should, because they'll both be 8 and 9 at the point.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yes, I think you're correct.
But say they stay at 20, right? And if to go from 20 to like what we talked about, okay, so if you want to go to 2, which might be really a big jump, definitely giving up 20. You're giving up a first round pick next year, and probably a third this year, and then another pick next year as well. So you're giving up at least 3 to 4 picks to do that jump. So no, my only question, I love Zach Wilson as well. My only question and some doubts I have with him is he didn't play really anybody this year in terms of the schedule, but that's not his fault. And his injury concerns the prior 2 seasons. This year he was relatively injury free, and we saw what he did. Now we talked about being a fit for the Bears. He's perfect in terms of this system. Assuming you keep Nagy, you keep the offensive coaching staff here. Zach Wilson is a perfect fit for this Bears system. His ability to move the pocket, manipulate his arm, be able to throw from different angles, downfield accuracy, solid arm strength, athletic enough to be a dual threat as well. So, and also he's like another kid. We touched on it with intangibles with Ellinger. He's another kid that's a film junkie. He's a guy that sits there and studies. The guys like Mahomes and Watson and Breeze, and he studies their tapes because he wants to get better. So, you like seeing that type of dedication off the field as well. So Zach Wilson hits all the, all the check marks for me as well. My only concern was coming into the season. He had a couple of injuries that he, limited his availability. But other than that, he's definitely a kid that's very, very talented.
Hey guys, I want to go over the quarterback needs one more time on this draft order list. Jacksonville needs a quarterback. The Jets need a quarterback. There's no doubt.
Depends who you believe on. And some saying the Jets might stick with Sam Darnold and draft a different.
I was talking to Greg Gabriel about that, and I agree with him. He thinks that Sam Darnold is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. He asked me this question: would you prefer Mitch Trubisky or Sam Darnold?
You're asking me? I prefer.
That's why the Jets are going to draft a quarterback.
Yeah. I would, if I'm the Jets, I'm drafting Justin Fields.
Yeah, you have to. If they've got the second pick, there's no way they're going to bypass that unless they get a very, very attractive offer for that number 2 pick. Then they'll say, okay, let's freaking stick with Darnold because we're going to get this treasure trove of picks. So
listen, in terms of natural talent and football intelligence, I'm going to take Darnold. But what I've seen the past couple of years from Darnold, and that might just be an Adam Gase thing. It might just be a Jets dysfunction thing.
That's a good point.
The kid just needs a change of address, man. I think that's what that comes down to. You put him in some place that actually has their shit together, you might see a different kid.
Yeah, you could. I'm not giving him throwing a towel, but I just even coming out of USC, I think he was my second or third quarterback. I had Josh Allen ahead of Darnold coming out of that draft class, but I don't know. It's something about him that the whole seeing ghost thing when they caught him on the sidelines. I kind of turned that when I see a quarterback with deer in headlights look in his eyes, that's never a good thing. And I see a lot of times with Sam Darnold. It could be because of his surroundings in terms of the Jets and his coaching staff. So that very well could be the case. But if I'm on the Jets and I have the chance to take Justin Fields or stick with Sam Darnold, I'm going Justin Fields, me personally.
You have to. You have to. So, okay, the Atlanta Falcons are definitely going to draft a quarterback.
Assuming they trade Matt Ryan, yes. But he has a big contract. He's got a big contract. So
I don't know. I think that he's movable. Then you got to ask yourself about the Philadelphia Eagles thing. They are trying to get rid of Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz wants to leave, so he'll probably renegotiate his contract. Why did the Eagles literally tank to move up from 9 to 6 for a draft pick? They can't be doing it for an offensive lineman. They can't be doing it for a wide receiver. They're doing it for a quarterback. They're not totally convinced about Jalen Hurts. They tanked that game because they are looking for a quarterback. I see in the first 6 picks, I see the possibility of 4 quarterbacks going, and then you got the Detroit Lions at 7. There's a possibility they're going to give up on Matt Stafford. So, man, quarterbacks are going to go quick, man.
I had 13 teams possibly looking for quarterbacks, 6 for sure. And I disagree with you, Aldo. I think Philadelphia is going to go with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. I think that number 6, they want either a receiver, because remember, their receiving core has been depleted, or an offensive lineman, because their offensive line also been depleted as well. So I think they could go either way. I don't think they're going to waste a second-round pick on Jalen Hurts and not make him the quarterback of the future. So we'll see there. But yeah, Detroit could trade Matt Stafford, and then the big rumor is Stafford to the Patriots. That's one thing that I keep hearing about. Carolina, I think with Teddy Bridgewater, I think they need a quarterback. I know you like Locke, Neil. I'm not sold on him, but I don't think Elway's going to go get another quarterback right now. So I think they'll give him another season. Dallas, I think they're going to resign Dak. I think Giants are going to stick with Jones, and I think 49ers might go for a quarterback, and because Garoppolo's contract is easy to move. Whether they just keep him off of the year or whatnot, I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, Minnesota could go for a quarterback. Talk about New England, and obviously the Bears too. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. But that one I want to ask, and I don't know if you've done your research yet, but Aldo, every year you come up with your quarterback, right? It was Mahomes. Last year was Jalen Hurts. You wanted Jalen Hurts. Who's your quarterback? Or have you not done your research yet?
I'm not finished doing my research, so okay. I will answer that question in about 6 weeks. Okay. But really, my opinion on it doesn't matter. The opinion that matters is you two guys, because you guys are the draft analysts. It's Danny Shimon, the senior draft analyst here at Bears Barroom, and Niel Stopczynski, our new guy on the block, our draft analyst. Both of you guys are doing all that tape research, and we are going to be talking about potential quarterbacks making the Chicago Bears, being picked by the Chicago Bears over the next several weeks. On next week's show, we're going to look at interior offensive linemen, and we're also going to do an evaluation of the Chicago Bears defensive players. Now, if the Bears win against the Saints this upcoming week, then we're going to talk about the Bears and Packers too. So we may be doing some shifting on some of our programming, but please know that these two guys above me are putting in the work. They're spending lots of time looking at tape so that they know what they're talking about when we do these shows. And these guys are very, very well qualified to talk about these prospects. Guys, any final words? I'll start with you, Danny. Any shout outs, any final words about this upcoming game? It's all yours, brother.
Like I said, I think the Bears have a fighting chance. I think they'll keep it close, but I unfortunately I think the season ends Sunday in the Superdome, and then for them that's where it gets interesting for me to see what happens. Decisions in terms of if they're going to make any changes whatsoever. Is this going to be possibly coaching changes only, and then we'll see what happens with the player movement. But that I think after the game on Sunday, I think that's when for me the intrigue starts.
Danny. Excuse me, Neil.
I'm not Danny. I think it's been really interesting. One of the things I talked about on our last Draft on Tap show was that be on the lookout for a ton of players declaring their draft eligibility or their draft declarations, making their draft declarations on Twitter, sending their papers into the league. I mentioned that date, January 18th, is a date that everybody needs to pay attention to because that is the deadline for draft declarations. You're going to have a record number this year because the NCAA went ahead and gave everybody an extra year of eligibility. So literally every single kid this year is going to have to fill out the paperwork. Every kid this year is going to have to declare, which is going to make the NFL office very busy over the course of the next week and a half. making sure that everybody is ready to go and is situated with all their paperwork and their legalese and everything else moving forward. I think it's going to be a really interesting game this Sunday. I have a lot of confidence, as much as I possibly can. Maybe it's not a lot, but it's as much confidence as I could possibly muster up, given how they played over the past few weeks. But it's I really think that we're at a point that, I mean, you have nothing but you really have nothing but confidence to have, just based on wanting the team to do well and just getting behind the hometown team. So, I mean, I'm gonna maintain positivity and just see what happens on Sunday. And I think as long as we have a similar game plan going into New Orleans, we're gonna be okay. Now, if we go ahead and get blown out, I will shove my foot in my mouth appropriately.
Well, are they going to cover? Are the Saints going to cover, or what? I need to make my bet.
Oh yes. The line is +10. My guy told me the line is +10.
There you go.
I think if you're in Vegas at certain books, you can get 9.5. I think one has it at 9, which is really intriguing. The money line prices
Bears
are
plus the points, or I'm taking the Saints to cover.
Say again?
Is it Bears plus the points, or am I taking the Saints to cover?
I think you're taking Bears plus points. If it's 10, I think you're taking a cover at 9.
Yeah, that's what I thought last week against the Packers, and in the fourth quarter, I thought, "Wow, this is looking good," and it didn't happen that way.
I think as far as situational football goes, let's just not taking a close fist to anybody wearing a helmet this week against the Saints. Let's try.
We didn't talk about that. It's a big rematch.
Let's try to avoid stupidity at all costs. Huh?
Definitely. Gentlemen, I want to let everyone know that we might be back here tomorrow. I'm not sure if you guys are available, but I've made an invitation to all of our Barroom Show hosts if they want to come on and talk more about the Bears and Saints game. And I'm extending that interview to you people in the chat room. You want to come on and spend 5 minutes asking questions live on camera, on video? Shoot me a tweet at Bears Barroom. That's my Twitter handle. And just let me know, and we'll set it up with you. We would love to have you on the show to talk. And if you don't have a Twitter account, then find me on Facebook. It's Aldo Gandia, Aldo Gandia. And that's it, guys. I think that's our show for today. Let me find my closing video. And there it is. That's not it.
That's not it.
But this is.